Huh?
Hey.
Hey.
How
How's
are
it
you?
been? I'm good. Been like months.
I know you've been busy.
I have been very busy. Ironically, I am still busy as I'm mostly packed. Tomorrow I'm flying to Mexico.
Wow.
Yeah. So it has been busy.
You going to help break ground on the wall?
No, I am going to a week-long deployment with Kids on Computers. They are a nonprofit organization that builds computer labs for schools. And so I currently have in my carry-on 4-gallon Ziplocs with 25 Raspberry Pis and 2 projectors. And we're going to go build a computer lab at some school 5 hours south of Mexico City.
Interesting. So,
Oh.
since you're doing that, there was an error loading your app. Well, what app was I loading? Are you there?
I'm there. I'm here.
Okay. So, what's interesting about this is, did you see the press release about the the Raspberry Pi Foundation, as you know, released Pixel for, or Raspbian for, PC architecture, right?
Yes.
Have you seen the application they spun up that lets you do net booting of Pis to build
The provisioning thing, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Here's the thing with net booting on the Raspberry Pi. I still think it's bugged out. I would be really surprised if people are actually having a good success with whole labs of net booted Raspberry Pis like that. I was really surprised to see that.
Because of the timing or the weirdness in switches, or
the fact that you have to find switches that bring up the interface fast enough to catch the one DHCP request. Right? Like, that's a totally unacceptable way to try and net boot an entire lab of Pis. Right? And it's like sure, like you can train the kids to sit there and like, well, if it doesn't come up, just power cycle it again. But I mean, I was really kind of shocked that they thought that was the net boot on the Raspberry Pi 3 was something that was actually worth promoting, because man, based on all the documentation I've seen up until this announcement, they clearly hacked that in as like a one evening, hey, what if sort of BIOS feature that then got almost no love afterwards.
Yeah, and if you read the documentation, they explain in pretty good detail the limitations they had with it and why, it's you either catch that packet or not. So when I transitioned my cluster to it, I had to try 3 different switches before I found one that would work.
Yeah.
And the one I found that does work is a Netgear. I think it's like the GS108E Plus or something. It's one of their it's gigabit pseudo smart switches. So there's like a web app.
Oh yeah, they do like the layer 2 custom protocol to push config onto it.
Yeah, and it's good for chaining a couple together or setting up some QoS. I don't know if you can configure VLANs on it, but in that particular family of switches, there's an 8-port, a 16-port, and a 24-port model.
Mm-hmm.
And I own a very similar switch by TP-Link. Actually, I own like 8 of them now. Well, not 8. And I've been curious if it would work as well, but I haven't tried. Because when I saw they released that, I thought, well, I'll give that a try. I've got enough Pis laying around that I'll see if that works. But time.
Yeah.
As in lack of.
I don't know. I mean, I was absolutely expecting something like this to come out with the Raspberry Pi 4.
Mm-hmm.
But I am just shocked that they think that the feature is good enough for prime time at this point. So,
especially considering the write-up for the utility doesn't at all mention, could be network weirdness.
Right. Caveat. Netboot is flaky as hell. Don't actually. I don't even know.
Yeah. So, well, that's still pretty cool.
Yeah. Take lots of
extra SD cards.
Yeah. Well, The commitment is it's going to be a lab of 15, plus another. We're bringing a spare 10 for. We're going to go out and tour the other labs they've built before and see what the fallout's been on other systems. And so for the first 3 days of building the new lab, we've got plenty of spares.
That's good.
And you're also about the only person I know who actually has anywhere near your mortality rate on an SD card. So I don't know what the hell it is you do.
Well, I mean, mine are running 24/7 crunching.
Yeah, although, but that shouldn't have that much disk I/O.
It's got enough. In fact, to the point that they are releasing a specific version of the BRP4 app that virtually eliminates how frequently it's writing basically like progress reports to a log file.
Mm-hmm.
So the funny thing about this is that had a high series of failure rates on the Pi 3 cluster, which is doing work units more quickly. The Pi 2 cluster, I haven't touched it. Like, I have not touched it at all. And of the 8 units in it, 4 of them are still running. So those, and that cluster has been alive now for over a year. So some of those cards have been okay. So
I don't know, man. I don't know what to say.
I mean, the other possibility is too, I mean, because I was using all the same cards. They were all Samsung, the orange Samsung Evo 16 gigs. It could have been a bad batch, but, well, no, because I killed a couple.
I would certainly hope that it was a bad batch sort of thing, because, I mean, I don't know of anyone else that has experienced your sort of failure rate, and, I mean, I thought that, like, with the Raspberry Pi 3 and them finally sorting out the power VRail problems, that most of that had gone away. So,
yeah, and especially considering I also invested in I did everything I could possibly do aside of injecting power straight into the GPIO to give it as much stable and high voltage power as possibly can be. Right. So,
we've got a question in the comments from Pablo. But yeah, he asked if we created clusters, and yeah, we've actually both built Raspberry Pi clusters.
Yeah, if you actually look through my YouTube channel, I have a couple of videos on it. I technically at this point, my Pi 3 cluster is all booting. So one Pi is booting off of an M2 SATA drive and a USB enclosure.
Yeah.
And then the other 7 Pi are booting in. In fact, actually, if you're watching,
hey, look at that. I can't quite reach mine for mine. I'll be right back.
This is my little Pi 3 cluster. So there are 8 Pi 3s in there. You can see the hard drive there on, I don't know if you'll see it on the left or right. The thing with the blinky blue light is the solid state drive. I've got 2 USB powered fans, and that little grill thing with the holes in it is the USB power. It's the USB power distribution. Yeah, so this thing runs 24/7, participating in a BOINC project called Einstein at Home. But yeah, it's actually funny. I don't even know if the fans are still running, but all of them are heat synced for thermal management. They average between like 49 and 52 degrees Celsius, and it's about as dense. Those are 18 millimeter standoffs I have in between each one, and that's about as dense as I can get it.
Yeah, no kidding.
Oh. We need known what have Zen server like cluster.
I mean, Zen's more of a hypervisor, so I don't even know what the ARM64 ARMFH virtualization situation is like. But here's mine. It's been sitting on my coffee table doing nothing because I refuse to manually set up all 6 of them myself. But it's DIN rail based. So on the back we've got 3D printed. These are off of Thingiverse. It's just a 30 degree desktop DIN rail mount. Piece of DIN rail, which is an industrial standard mounting rail. And then on Amazon, you can get these things called dinner plates that are DIN rail mounts for the Pis. 6 of those. One board that is a what 12 to 5-volt DC-DC 10 amp, and then a custom USB power distribution board I designed, and then a DIN rail Ethernet switch, which, since it has DIN rail in the name, has a very high premium on the device, and it's about a $500 Ethernet switch. So would not recommend.
No.
DIN rail is a bad idea for projects.
Did you, of course, did you see was it 1,000 node or 700 node Pi 3 cluster that Bitscope built for Los Alamos?
I've had like a dozen people sending me pictures of the new like 19-inch rack mount enclosures that are high density. Was it one of those?
I mean, so their original rack mount thing was 4 units per we'll call it a blade.
Mm-hmm.
Their biggest issue is that their power budget for each Pi was only like, I can't remember. I remember that when it first came out, there was a guy in my on my crunching team for Einstein at Home who was like, "You got to try this stuff. It's the greatest stuff ever." I'm like, "It won't run 4 Pis at full tilt based on current consumption. It assumes no more than, I think it's like 2 amps total for all 4. They may have changed that because obviously now they've got the unit that I think it's 4U for 20 Pis, but I don't know if they've done any more high density.
Yeah, that's still pretty low density, right?
Yeah, the company is Bitscope. I'm going to their website to have a look at if they've done new stuff. No, that's Bitscope Pi. I want Bitscope Blade, I think is what they call it. So here, I'll post the link in the chat.
Seemed like like a backplane thing. Oh, there we go. Oh, that's interesting. How they like just make bus bars on each side with 12 volts on it.
Yep.
That's very open compute of them.
Hello, hello.
Hey, buddy.
Hey,
how you
look at
guys
that.
doing?
Good.
I'm in the dark. Sorry, I'm in my bedroom packing to head up to the Bay Area for BayCon tomorrow.
Nice.
I get on the road at like 5 o'clock in the morning, which I don't know why the hell I decided to do that.
And I'm in the Bay Area packing to get out of the Bay Area. So
where are you
see
headed?
you. I'm headed to Oaxaca, Mexico tomorrow.
Oh, what's in Oaxaca?
I'm going with an organization called Kids on Computers, and we're building a computer lab for some primary school a couple hours outside of Oaxaca because it seemed like a good adventure this week.
Sure. No, I'm on board.
Yeah. So apparently they've been doing this for about 10 years, and they've pretty much given up on the whole accepting donations of some companies' dead and retired laptops, and they've transitioned to almost entirely Raspberry Pis. So I have 25 Raspberry Pis in my carryout.
I've been seeing that on Twitter. I wasn't sure what the full context of that was. That makes more sense. Not
paid for by me. So
I'm like, okay, what kind of a compute cluster are you building?
I don't know. Now that I've started playing with Xeons, I'm pretty well sold on them. They're pretty nice.
Yeah. I am going through the closet picking T-shirts right now. Terribly exciting stuff to stream on a Friday night.
It might be if you have some awesome T-shirts.
Well, let's see here. Where's the flip around? I don't know if you're going to have... Yeah, it's not well lit enough, is it?
Got a lot of belts.
So, DEF CON Darknet shirt, Led Zeppelin, Maker Faire, EFF, Ioneth Krakens, Hawaiian Chieftain, Cookie Monster on a Bender, one of my favorites.
That's adorable.
Stormtrooper head. Yeah, it's not well lit in here.
Yeah.
I've got a NASA shirt. Anyway, What? No, knock it off.
Hi, Jeff.
What's
Oh,
that?
it's Jeffrey.
Yes. Ladies and
You
gentlemen,
too?
Jeff Glass. So I'm
Yeah. Sorry, I was gonna say, yeah. So these Bitscope blade things are cute, but I mean, really, I made a six node cluster because I got it stuck in my head that I wanted to make a pretty cluster, and I figured 6 was just big enough to call a cluster. But I'm kind of over it.
Kind of over the whole cluster thing.
Yeah, it's kind of like, container orchestration is kind of just as effective.
Well, and that's so when I was I don't think I have any of the pieces left. Early on, back when Pi Zeros were still selling for like $40 on eBay, I was able to go to my local micro center and buy 2 every day and just pay the $5 a piece. So long before, like, there were still people who couldn't get one, and I had 10 of them. And I 3D printed a custom stand for them. I had bought this 4-port USB hub, took it out of its box. It was really cool. And as I was trying to get those to cluster by turning them all into Ethernet gadgets, ran into a limitation that the USB ports are slow enough that if you try to attach more than 5 to a single Pi 3, that it's like you press a character while SSH'd into a machine, and it takes about a minute for it to echo back on the screen. But anyway, I met a guy named Alex Ellis because he was doing something similar. He's one of the Docker captains, and so he's very famous for going around doing all kinds of Docker and Kubernetes and whatnot demos with Pi Zeros and Pi 3s.
Right, which is pretty much what I'm doing with this. I built mine as a trainer to, how to does cluster management, but have never gotten around to it since my life has been relatively busy for the last year.
Well, and it's not even really. I mean, even calling what we built a cluster is a misnomer, because, like you said, container orchestration versus actually like MPI or something.
Yeah.
I work for Amazon. I just spin up Lambda instances when I need them.
Yeah.
Mark is, to use the phrase, cloud privileged.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I actually might have to register for a new account, because years ago when I set up or connected my Amazon account to AWS, they're like, "Oh, have a year free of such and such." Well, I never used it, and that year is long gone. So I actually have a reason to spin up an instance now to play with something fun.
The free tier is different than it used to be. I don't know exactly how it's billed now. You probably don't have to create a new account. I think it's if you stay, you get so many hours of this particular type of instance for free per year. So I think it is, don't quote me on this, don't email me, people who are watching this. I think it is that if you, like, for example, the T2 Micro is one of the free instances. If you stay with the T2 Micro and that's all you use, then it's basically free forever. If you spin up an API gateway and only use so many requests per month or whatever, then it's basically free forever, et cetera, et cetera.
You're talking, but that's through Lambda, right?
Well, the API gateway and Lambda stuff, yeah, but the T2 Micro, if you need to spin up an actual full-time instance, I think you can get away with doing that free forever.
So the use I have for this is, so George was incredibly sweet and sent me a gift in the form of a Shark RF OpenSpot.
Nice. I need to get one of those before my trip.
The thing that's cool about this, and I've been doing hotspots for a while. Actually, if you can see this little blue box,
I can.
That's my custom designed and 3D printed case for my BlueStack with DV Mega. Somewhere over on the junk table behind me is a DVAB. What's interesting about this is that using DMR, this guy has written a server stack for basically custom private network, basically.
Mm-hmm. Kind of a
So
replacement for the Seabridge or Brandmeister.
Brandmeister, yep.
Yeah.
So you basically, everything's compiled from source, but I've been thinking about trying to give it a go this weekend, throwing it out on the old cloud, and then having a private.
So
talk.
We know a guy who might be able to get you some hosting for a very good price.
Yeah.
In fact, you happen to know a couple of guys who you are on the phone with right now.
Yeah.
I'm actually happy to spin up a VM for you if you want.
Well,
to be clear, not Amazon. This is not Amazon. This is my personal stuff. Anybody who's listening, I am not offering to give you free Amazon services. This is a ham radio service that I have my own server hardware in a data center somewhere that I can spin up instances on, and I am happy to talk to you and get some more details from you offline on that if you were interested, Jeremy.
I am very interested. So Jeff,
I've got about the same deal, except that my hypervisor is currently lacking solid state hard drives, but I just got the disk shelf for it right there. So
well, real quick, Jeff, you say, is there a way to make clustering more transparent to Kubernetes or other container management, or is this the hard part? I just posted a Twitter handle that you should go and seek him out, and he almost certainly is the expert and can tell you. Like I said, he's one of the Docker captains. He's been playing a lot with Kubernetes lately. I don't have time. I have kids. I traded time for kids. But he would be somebody.
Have you found somebody who will give you time in exchange for kids?
No, it doesn't work the other way around.
Damn
Seems to be like a one-way transaction.
One-way transaction.
Yeah. So,
oh man.
Now I have found people who will take kids and money in exchange for time.
Well, yeah, that's not uncommon.
Yep.
But no. So now going on to your thing, what was the comment you made the other day about 1 GB solid state drives?
That is these.
Yeah, are you talking about Samsung Pros?
No, they're so I was recently gifted, I think it's like 15 Optiplex FX160s. So these are little dual core, well, they're like single core hyper-threaded Atom boxes.
Okay, good.
That the stock config on them is that it comes with a 1 GB embedded SATA hard drive in it.
1 GB, not terabyte.
Gigabyte.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah. And so I had these were donated to Kids on Computers from someone local. So I actually went and picked them up and packed them and shipped them to Kids on Computers, one of their engineers, a couple months ago. And they looked at it and they poked at it, and it like they worked out, because you can buy a 2.5-inch hard drive bracket for these. But they worked it out that like all the accessories to turn this into something that's useful, it was about a wash compared to just buying more Raspberry Pis and keeping all their labs consistent. And so he shipped them back to me to play with, because unlike one of these lab deployments where we want them to be bulletproof, I have no qualms about using like iSCSI to enhance the capabilities.
Very much not bulletproof.
Not at all bulletproof. And so I have one of these things set up now in my living room that the 1 gig drive in it, which I will actually sit here and open up for you. The 1 gig drive only has the /boot drive, and everything else, the entire root partition, is on a iSCSI LUN, I guess they're called.
Yeah.
On my apartment's Synology NAS. And so everything's done over the network. Because these boxes have they come with gigabit Ethernet and then little like 1.6 gigahertz atoms on them. So it's kind of a nice, bottom heavy sort of device.
What generation Atom?
It's a 230. So
sounds like a biblical question.
Yeah, it's not good. The fact that it lacks hardware like graphics acceleration kind of is more evident than anything else. But it's really tempting since these things are like, in their own enclosures and fanless and take 120 volts. Building these up is like Aper's iGate boxes of some sort because they have real RS-232 ports on them. But that's me. But yeah, so on the motherboard, it has like the SATA data plus power connector. Like this was like a backplane on a like drive bay, and then it has these little. These are actually real common in embedded like single board computers that aren't SD based. This little board with some flash memory on it, and a whole 2.5 inch, a whole, I guess it's not even 2.5 inch SATA data and power connector. And that thing just plugs onto the motherboard. Right there. And boom, 1 gigabyte of onboard storage. And you can find all sorts of these embedded SATA drives on eBay. And if you get lucky enough, you could probably find ones with the right orientation. And I could probably get one that would go in there regardless with the right orientation. But I saw the opportunity to take 15 like sub 20 watt desktop computers like this is kind of a tempting thing for throwaway projects. So
yeah,
cool.
It's like, and like just for the
and you said they had gigabit hardware on them.
Yeah, I believe they have gigabit Ethernet. They all came with a single 2 gig stick of RAM and an empty slot. So I'm taking the RAM out of half of them and putting them in the other half.
Can you show me? Okay, what's the platform? So these are just motherboards, or is this
no,
come in a full chassis?
It's the full, totally finished desktop Optiplex FX160 thin client. And so they've got their own custom 120 IEC power supply and their own motherboard.
And it's fanless?
It's fanless. So it's got processor and then a heat pipe over to additional heat sinking there.
Okay.
So fanless there, all the bridge is there.
What's the output of the power supply? Is it only 12 volts? I only saw the yellow and the black there. Is there more?
Yeah, it's a single CPU Molex 4-pin.
Wow.
Have you tried replacing that with a different 12 volt source?
I have not yet. Like I literally got these things for Monday. So
and are these yours to dispose of?
They're mine. Yeah, they were gonna go donate them to like a thrift store. I'm like, dude, if you guys aren't gonna use them, no one at a thrift store is gonna find success.
What do you want for one of them?
Yeah.
Nothing. I don't know how I'm gonna get it to you this weekend, but
well, when you get back, I'd be interested in one, especially if you said you can buy SSD brackets for them.
Yeah, there's a 2.5 inch bracket for it. So
yeah.
Show me the SATA port again. What's the SATA configuration?
So it has one SATA port there that for any standard cable.
Okay.
But then it also has, and this is what these came configured with, is with the embedded drive here that has the standard SATA connector and power.
Oh, okay. So
wait, is that an M2 port?
No, I think that's
no.
PCI MPCIe for the Wi-Fi connector that's not populated on this config.
That's actually stupid easy to.
Yeah, it's a UFL.
I have a couple of those laying around.
Yeah, although it's not a 1/4 inch hole, so it's not a UFL to SMA RPSMA panel mount. They clearly have some sort of other custom thing here.
It's probably TNC. That was another common. It might be RPTNC, but I know a lot of the
it's got
Linksys gear was TNC.
Yeah, it's got some like EMC fingers and it's like octagonal. So I'm not convinced it's a panel mount TNC either.
Okay.
But then again, there's a lot of board space back here that you could drill whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
So what I'm thinking, I've got a Raspberry Pi 3 as my home router and home network right now, and the USB attached 100 megabit network is becoming a limitation. And so I am interested in something that is low power, can be powered off of 12 volts, and And fanless is another big one that will actually be able to do full proper networking.
Yeah.
And I would be looking at that for a host for Spy server for SDR dongles without taking up a nice nook.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest limitation of it is that it's a 230, so it's a single core.
Not a lot of horsepower.
Not a lot of horsepower.
Yeah.
But
it's more horsepower than my Tinker board.
I don't know. I'm not convinced. I mean,
yeah,
because it's single hyper-threaded 1.6 gig is not much.
Yeah, that's probably less than the Pi 3 I'd be replacing.
By quite a bit, yeah.
Yeah. But the Pi 3, I may keep the Pi 3 for the server-ish type applications that it's currently doing, and then just use this as a network.
Yeah, I mean, for moving packets that are full MTU, I would be surprised if you didn't at least get a few hundred megabits out of it. But yeah, so theoretically,
wow. Okay, I didn't realize how piss poor that is.
Yeah, it's a bit anemic.
It has a pass mark score of 307. For comparison, a second generation Core i5 has a score of 6,900.
Yeah,
second generation i5, good enough.
Yeah, it is not fair to compare an Atom processor of any generation, especially not the older ones, to the modern Core i5s. That is just not a fair comparison at all.
Oh. Okay, well, so my theory has been, so theoretically, if you cut off all of these jumpers and one of the front panel connectors, you could actually take a 2.5-inch drive and just plug it into the motherboard, but it clearly doesn't have the clearances for it.
You say you thought you were hoping it could, but it doesn't.
Well, it's a mechanical interference on all the other connectors on here. Right, but it's literally the same connector. So if you got like
electrically it works, but
yeah. So if you got a SATA extender, like a male-female pigtail,
yeah,
you could just drop that on that one there as well. But it actually supports both at once. There's a SATA power header in here somewhere that's like the little 2mm 4-pin, and then if you're careful on which one of the 2.5-inch brackets you get on eBay. They come with the harness for it as well as a fan. For some reason the 2.5-inch drive bracket comes with the little squirrel cage fan for it as well. So.
Hey, help me remember something.
All right.
Isn't there a way that I can make the audience see all of us? Oh no, they can. They already can. They already can.
Okay.
We're just down in the corner, aren't we?
Yeah, and the main thing is if you click on someone, it locks them up as opposed to trying to do it by Vox.
Yeah. Don't do that to me right now because people are mostly seeing my ceiling right now.
So Pitt, I don't know what he means. I have 144 pi video lags. He's talking about lags. I don't know what the lags mean.
I don't know either.
Link aggregation groups, and were we talking
that's what I was
pi
thinking.
and networking?
I don't think that.
Yeah, I mean, the Pi still only has a single interface, and it's still USB connected, and the
Yeah,
Pi CPU only has a single USB port on the device.
Yeah.
So you're never going to get anything better than what you have.
No, and at best case scenario, it's my understanding that 70 megabits per second is about all she'll do.
Yeah, and I've got a 60 megabit cable connection, so that works out. But
as long as you're only going in one direction.
Yeah, and you're not SSHing into it or something.
No, because it's USB. Well, no, USB is not full duplex, but the Ethernet is full duplex.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, I have no idea whether the USB is full duplex. Never mind.
Yeah. So we can talk after the stream about how I'm gonna leave one of these on my porch for you or something.
Yes. When are you leaving?
I'm getting picked up at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning.
Okay.
So, if you stopped on the way to Baycon, we could probably just meet up and
yeah,
I can hand you one.
My goal is to be on the road from here around 5 or 5:30, which will get me to Baycon right about 9 o'clock.
Yeah, that'd work fine.
So, and you're not far from the convention area, are you?
I'm on 17 and 280.
Oh shit! Really? That far south?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you were up in Sunnyvale.
No. I'm my apartment's down in somewhere that I could afford to get it with my last job.
Okay.
Even though it's been a year and a half, I still haven't moved up closer to Fremont.
Oh, this is the place with the crappy internet?
Yeah.
Because I'm like, you're actually streaming quite nicely right now.
I am. So turns out I hadn't when I logged into my client bridge above my upstream of my router to tie it to a specific access point in my apartment complex's Wi-Fi system, like community Wi-Fi, it hadn't stuck. And so it was roaming access point to access point and not using the one directly across the hallway from me.
Got it.
I have properly gotten it BSSID locked to a specific access point that it can actually like talk to. So
got it.
RSSI on my upstream internet is now pretty stable. And it, other than like NAT wigging out about once an hour, it's pretty good.
Well, that's good.
What do we got there, Jeremy?
This is a 60-watt foldable solar panel.
Oh, look at that.
The power films, yeah.
And this thing is actually a third of the size of the 120 watts I have. And
does that work?
desert camo.
Yeah, whatever. That's not a selling. Sorry, but that's not a selling point for me.
Oh, the camo?
Yeah.
It's not a selling point for me either, but it's what
Hey,
they
how are you going to be tactical amateur if you don't have your camo? You know,
ooh, wait, guys, it gets better. We have our ACS 30-watt panel.
Yep. Also desert camo.
Well, no, this is ACS. The other is not actually. That's more like British.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I was say because our desert camo is called chocolate chips because of the big white and. How do you open this?
Have you tried the Velcro?
Well, that's the thing is. Oh, here it is. Okay, the Velcro was hidden.
I was actually being facetious, but okay, yeah.
And then
apparently he hasn't. Oh shit! I'm not actually packing up my CPAP yet. I need to sleep tonight. I leave in the morning.
Isn't that hard? Like I've got this big list on my whiteboard of like stuff that I don't want to pack yet, but I need to.
But need to pack in the morning. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting.
Oh yeah, because they use that. Yeah, that connector.
This is one of their. They've really gone up. I don't know. So this is what the connector looks like, right? This is an AC Delco weather pack automotive connector.
Okay.
The thing that's notable about this is so the 60-watt panel they sent me is current generation. The 230s they sent me, still a weather pack connector, but this is actually the original OEM actual weather pack connector that you would find in a car. The other one is much more nicely molded and has a black gasket instead of the green one. But the thing that's amazing, their newer generation, I think, are slightly more efficient. So 30 watts. I'm holding this. Hold on.
Yeah, that's not a profound difference.
Yeah, I mean thickness it is.
Thickness it is. Yeah.
3 times as thick, but yeah, this will go good with the 2 120s I have.
Yeah. So Jeff in the chat is asking if I ever got around to playing with the Pocket Beagles. I went back and looked at the Pocket Beagles real hard because I had a few project ideas for it. And then I remembered how painful all of the Beagle project documentation was as far as like get from out of the box to first running system to actually getting to do something, and noped the hell out. So
Nope. Got the picture of the little squid You remember the animated squid? Like, nope, 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 all the way
Yeah,
across the
exactly.
screen.
Right.
Yeah.
Like I went and loaded up and started reading the data sheet, or like no, it was I started reading like the quick start user's manual, and I'm like 30 pages into it, and I still have no idea how it even loads the operating system, and I'm like, you know what? I don't need this. I don't need this in my life. So I've given them a hard time about their documentation, and they're aware of where they know where their weaknesses are. So I have already told them all these things. But,
I'm sure they appreciate you telling them exactly where their weaknesses are.
yeah. And apparently Beagle is now separate from TI, as they've actually spun that off as their own organization, which is really good because I think
TI?
a lot of no longer a Texas Instruments project. Beagle is totally independent.
Beagle used to be part of TI?
Yeah, it was one of the things that was kind of a skunkworks thing with TI employees and engineers, which I think was a lot of the reason why it never was a priority, because it was something that people just kind of did.
Interesting.
So,
okay.
Yeah.
So I was not aware of any previous association between BeagleBone and TI.
Yeah, no, it was like the Beagle was TI's, SoC demo board, right? And they had the Beagle MX.
I was not aware of that.
Yeah, I mean the Beagle came like what? Even like the BeagleBone came out in like 2007 or something.
Yeah, and I mean that was long before the BeagleBone Black, because then there was like the XM15 or whatever.
Yeah, I think that predates the Bone.
It does,
right? But like the Beagle project is ancient, and it's just a testament to how bad TI markets itself that no one heard of it until after the Raspberry Pi, and everyone accused TI of coming out with this, come along of trying to ride the wave of the Raspberry Pi. And it's like, no, they predate them by like the better part of a decade.
Yeah, but the funny thing is the Raspberry Pi pretty much, I don't know, coined the single board computer and made it relevant.
It dropped the price
bracket. They definitely made it relevant.
But,
I'm not sure that they would, price bracket, and they definitely made it relevant by their documentation and their outreach, for lack of a better word. But I would hesitate to say that they coined the term. There have been single board computers around for a long time before that.
Yeah, what was it? There was the industry standard of like something 104, like PC 104.
PC 104.
Yeah, single board computers have been a thing for 20 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
PC 104 has been around since the 80s.
Yeah. Oh God, it's 2018. Yeah, like several decades.
So there's a question from Jot Dot. Who are you guys for us newcomers?
Let's introduce ourselves. Who the hell is this guy who keeps running around his house? Jeremy, you're kind of the host here. Why don't you go?
Yeah, go for it.
So I am Jeremy KF7IJZ, co-host of the Ham Radio Workbench podcast. And these are our groupies and honored guests and fantastic friends of the show.
Hi, my name is Mark Smith. I am the Statler of the Statler and Waldorf crew here. We also get Peanut Gallery, hecklers, all of that kind of stuff. KR6ZY, Kilo Romeo 6, Zulu Yankee, crazy with a 6 in the middle. I am at Smitty Halibut on Twitter, SMITTYHALIBUT. I got a hold of Jeremy at one point and said, I like talking. And so he made the mistake of putting me on his podcast and hasn't been able to get me to go away since. So, that was his mistake, and he's still paying for it.
Both of you were two of the best things I picked up in 2017.
Oh, thank you.
Sure.
Yeah.
Speaking of the two of you.
Right. And then I'm Kenneth Finnegan, KWF on Twitter, W6KWF amateur radio call sign. And I'm another one of the friends of the podcast that I originally got introduced to Ham Radio 360. Kiteless. What's his real name? Jason at Baynet.
I don't know.
Yeah, he's one of the members of Baynet, who Mark is currently packing to come up to the Bay Area for BayCon.
But George is the only one I know from Baynet.
Oh yeah, right. Like the synthetic club. Anyways, so he's like, I ran into him at Pacificon last year, I think it was Pacificon. He said, "Yeah, there's this Ham Radio 360 podcast. It's not as awful as every other amateur radio podcast."
High praise, man. High praise.
Right. And so yeah, then I started poking Kale, who runs the actual parent Ham Radio 360 podcast, and following him on Twitter. He was doing Apers stuff and clearly didn't know what he was doing. So I finally like set up a phone call
to do Apers stuff.
Right. I'm like, all right, I'm just going to talk you through it. And then we recorded 3 hours of podcast on an APRS, and then I got to know Jeremy, and history happened from there.
So you know what's funny about that phone call? He called me after that, and he said, "You're not going to believe this." I said, "What?" And he said, "Some dude in California just spent hours on the phone with me trying to get my APRS setup working."
Yeah, getting us to shut up is the hard part.
Right. And,
less talking we have to do.
And the thing is, like, I've been much more prone to set up those sorts of 45-minute, hour-long phone calls to do tech support, because, like, I get so many emails every week from people that when I see people that are, like, tantalizingly close and clearly worth the effort, not doing 15 rounds of back and forth and email, the phone calls tend to be so much easier. So...
Speaking of APRS, there is a VHF noise source in my neighborhood that keeps blasting out 144.385.
That's outrageous.
Yeah. So my my iGate is not as
useful.
Listeny. I don't know what the word is. Yeah, it can't hear.
Yeah.
It's got somebody just putting out a carrier on 8.5.
Do you guys play with SDR? My answer is an emphatic no. I like radios that are actually designed for what they're being used for.
You like hardware?
Well, yeah. So my problem is I have fallen in the trap of I mostly use commercial radios. That commercial radios enjoy really good, robust front ends, so you can put them in RF challenging environments. Where SDRs, people generally want them to be able to tune DC to daylight with no filtering at all, which makes them fall over at any possible local interference.
The problem is that there is no commercial radio that will tune DC to daylight. All the commercial radios tune one very little tiny section of the band. And as long as you can get it into that tiny section where you want it to be, they're fantastic. And as long as you only want to be in one place or one range of places and 16 total places, then they're fine. But for a lot of the amateur work where we want some frequency agility, they have some serious limitations. So it's really all about your use case.
Right.
Yeah. And I mean, any of I guess technically 2 transceivers that I own are classified as SDRs, the ICOM 7300 and the Elecraft KX3, in a sense that they're direct conversion receivers. The 7300 has band filtering, but not enough. Like, it's useless at field day. I learned that. I was on 20 and the 80 meter station was blowing me away, and the antennas were, 90 degrees opposed. I play with a lot of SDR dongles. I'm a huge fan of the AirSpy dongles because I think it's a lot of value for the money. I have a lot of RTL SDR dongles as well because that's the $20 gateway drug to software-defined radios. For me, though, looking at the fact that they are receivers, to me, the killer app for them is, so where I live in an antenna-restricted community. We have a bedroom upstairs that's unoccupied, and I was able to plug 2 AirSpies into a little Asus Tinkerboard single-board computer, run Spy Server, and from anywhere in my house, I can now receive radio. And that's, like I said, that's the killer app for me, is that it allows me to keep the radio close to the antenna and then use our network to pipe it anywhere I want it to go.
Right.
Yeah. So again, it's all about the use case, right?
Yeah.
I think SDR definitely has its advantages, and like the 7300, that's something that that ICOM could totally fix. That's something they could fix with proper pre-selection. It knows what band you're on at any given time. All they need to do is put a pre-selector on the front end of that, and that would be solved.
it is pre-selected. It's just not built to withstand high power.
Right. So it's not pre-selected enough.
That's your.
It's not adequate.
Yeah, that just means that your pre-selector is crummy.
Well, I mean, it's adequate if you're not around antennas that are 10 feet away from you.
I mean, every radio is adequate if you're not near other antennas.
Yeah. I mean, I've got an AM broadcast station that is about 3 miles that direction. And I've got a radio that doesn't have any pre-selection. It is completely worthless. It doesn't matter what frequency it's on because it will overload the front end so bad. My SWR meter needs to have an AM broadcast filter on it because the receive power coming from that AM station is enough to throw off the reflected power reading, and you can actually see the SWR needle on the antenna analyzer twitching because, and it looks like it's a VU meter. If you tune to that 1280, that AM station, you'll actually see the SWR needle twitch with the audio peaks.
That's awesome,
right? Radios should have pre-selection on the front end.
Right. And
so, anyway,
and me using commercial radios is real easy because my amateur radio frequencies include 144.39, 144.99, 441.875 positive offset, which is the amateur test pair, like temporary repeater test pair. And then everything else I do radio wise is all commercial 450 to 480. Yeah. So makes it real easy.
Yeah. What are you doing commercial?
All the events I work.
Oh.
Yeah. I got my own Part 90 commercial license because it turns out that's super. You fill out a Schedule 601D form, which is like, I don't know what, 10 pages long. It's $165. You give them the money, FCC gives you the license. And so I have a Part 90 commercial itinerant license for the continental U.S. south of Line A, for myself and 500 of my closest friends on every single itinerant frequency. And so I can go to these events, and under my own license, we'll run the whole event, and we hand out commercial handhelds to the entire volunteer staff. And so we'll go to like Bearcom or Golden Gate Radio, and we'll rent 300 HTs and run the whole event. And amateur is just one relatively small sliver of our communication.
Yeah, I'm surprised you don't own 300 HTs yet.
Well, yeah. I started collecting. I started collecting a few fleets. So I've got yeah, I've got 6 VHF HT 750s, and I've got 4 between CDM HT 1250s and the 150s. I've got about 8 or 9 commercial UHF handhelds. So the number of radio,
those numbers mean nothing to me.
I've got something on the order of about 30 handhelds in my apartment, plus about another 30 mobile rigs.
In storage?
So, it's in my RF lab, which is the master bedroom of the apartment, on industrial shelving, as I have industrial shelving in there set up.
As you do.
Yeah, you know. So
like you do.
That ultimately has not turned out to be as successful because it's a relatively narrow window. Like, I've used them in like sets of 3 for like individual teams a lot, but the window of usefulness between having 5 loaner HTs and having 100 loaner HTs, there's very few times you need any number in between there. So I regret having gotten half of those. Like for me to have gotten 5 real solid radios that I know that they all work because I use them regularly. Those are the ones I use, and I haven't touched the other ones in a year and a half.
Yeah. I need to get moving because my alarm is going off at 4 o'clock in the morning. So I'm going to get some sleep before headed off to Baycon tomorrow.
All right.
Make sure you drive safe. Record a statement for the show. If you haven't switched your feed, switch your feed over to our feed.
Oh, I already have.
Good. Thank you. Tell your friends, and Happy New Year.
I'm still like a month and a half behind on podcasts at this point. I think I just finished listening to the shopping The one that had like you and Kale and um,
John.
Field Radio podcast guy, John. Thank you.
So one last thing that sucks is the 7th book for The Expanse came out, but there's no audio book for it yet.
Oh man.
What? I'm still on book 3, or I just finished book 3. Just about a month ago. I have not picked up book 4 yet. I'm still trying to get caught up on podcasts before I get back into books.
All right, Smitty. Well, take care. Thanks for stopping by.
Absolutely. I will see you guys later. I'll say hi to George tomorrow for both of you. And Kenneth, I'm not going to bother trying to come up and get that box tomorrow. I just got too much other stuff going on. And besides, I'm headed off to Seattle for a week, and I don't want to bring it with me. So I'll do it some other time.
Yeah, I'll run to you at some point.
Sounds good, guys. Have fun.
Peace, brah.
All right. And then there was 2.
Jeff says 7300 bandpass filters are surprisingly tight for general coverage. 1.5 or 2 megahertz to 10 megahertz, then 8 to 10 megahertz up to 6 meters, with a dedicated 4 megahertz bandpass filter for 6 meters. Not as tight as an HF specific rig, say, but better than the old Yaesu. Yeah.
Right, where like you look at commercial radios, and I've got commercial radios that have 150 kilohertz wide front ends.
Yeah.
Right. You can't compete with that.
No.
Right. No, granted, I've also been the savior for several people that own. I'm thinking specifically of the Kenwood TKR 850, which is a repeater rack mount radio they have. I have magically improved several repeaters' sensitivity by 8 or 9 dB by pointing out that they have to open it up and tune these little helical filters they have on the front end. Because people don't know about it, and they'll just set the Kenwood to a new frequency. And so they'll be way off in the skirts of the front end, and it'll lose 6 or 8 dB. Wow. So read your user manual.
I don't know. Not really a whole lot else going on.
I was gonna unpack this disc shelf I just received.
Ooh.
So it's freaking Christmas today. So this is part of the long slide of. This is the slippery slope that has been this autonomous system project that I got into, where I have founded my own. I have an entire rack in a data center in Fremont. Have you seen the blog post about this, Jeremy?
I've been watching you do work on it.
Yeah, right. So this was my buddy and I sat down and we did the math. We figured out that between all the different hosting services and Dropbox and file shares and offsite backups, everything that between the two of us, we could condense all of it together and pay marginally less to lease an entire rack in the data center. And then one of my other friends gifted me a pretty good, well-spec'd out 1U server. And I'm like, well, I've got the 1U server. Now I just need the rack to put it in. And then it's been a long slippery slope that has resulted in I now have my own public IP space. I'm running my own router as its own autonomous system that BGP hands off with other ISPs. So I'm literally my own autonomous ISP that I could take this router and pick it up and put it in any co-location facility, and it would still run exactly as configured now. But I'm running a hypervisor on it that runs. I now have the hosting capability that I can just, for every single one of my services, I can spin up its own VM. So web hosting is its own VM. Network monitoring is its own VM. Mail is its own VM. SSH, like remote access, is its own VM. Like I'm up to about 10 VMs now. I had forgotten how awful it is running operating systems off of spinning disk hard drives. I realized I haven't done this in like, I don't know, something like 6 years since the last time I installed an OS on a spinning disk. And I originally figured, it's an array of 4 drives. It'll be fine. Turns out 4 drives is a little bit better than OneDrive speed-wise. 10 operating systems on top of 4 drives, not so good. See, we got people saying hello. Okay. So one of my friends then, and this is the thing, once you make a blog post about, hey, I'm setting up an enterprise rack in a data center in the Bay Area, it just starts collecting people pulling stuff out of their garbage. And so one of my friends gifted me, these are HGST enterprise solid state SAS drives. So they're not SATA, they're SAS, which is a higher, like it's a superset of SATA and faster. These are 200 gigabyte SSDs, and he gifted me a case of 16 of them.
Wow.
As you do.
As you do, yeah.
But
he was going to throw them away.
Literally, that was the case. But these are 2.5-inch drives. And the NAS that I built to host the VMs for my hypervisor, which is a separate server and was the original free server, only has 3.5-inch bays and only has 12 of them, because I figured, when would I ever possibly need more than 12 hard drives? And now I've got 16 hard drives plus the 4 I had originally, plus another 6 that other people have given me. So clearly I need some 2.5-inch drive shelves. So I went on eBay, and for about what was it? It was about $200. I managed to get what's called a disk shelf, which is just hard drive bays, and it's got a SAS 4-lane connector on the back that goes up to a PCIe card on my file server. So is this right side up? I think it's right side up. So it's a 2U rack mount device that has 25 2.5-inch shelves on it. And so the thought is that which then on the back of it, this one happens to have full, we're hooked. This one happens to have 2 fully redundant controllers. So it's got 2 power supplies, which is great because I have dual power in this rack. But it has 2 controllers that each have an in and an out. So I can actually, I believe I can chain effectively an arbitrary number of these disk shelves. I think I'm limited to, I can only have 500 disks on the whole chain, which is a lot. But so I can, for another $35 on eBay, I got a SAS controller. So this PCIe card has SAS ports here that I can then cable to here. And then these 25 bays look like they're part of the main server that it came with. So, problem is they didn't come with sleds. Because these, all 25 bays are filled with these plastic blank off caps that can't hold hard drives. We got a question from, this is a HP StorageWorks D2700. So it's not actually, this isn't actually like a marketed device. This is supposed to be part of your HP storage appliance that you buy the whole thing. And so no one would ever want just this part of it because it's totally useless on its own. It's just it's one part of their appliance. It looks exactly like one of their marketed disk shelves, which goes for several $100s more on eBay because it's an actual part that you could buy normally. It speaks SAS. It doesn't really care.
So, a question about that. In the old days, IBM, Sun, all those guys would sell things exactly like that for storage solutions that all looked like they were standard connectors, but firmware along the way would guarantee that it would only work with whatever system it was sold as a part of.
Yeah, and you still see that a lot. Like I've run into like the Dell Sans, their storage appliances. They expect specific firmware on the hard drives. And so if you try and use, non-OEM hard drives on the Dell ones, it'll like pop up a warning at the beginning saying, "Oh my God, you're not using approved hard drives." The thing here is there's almost no intelligence on this. It's like an LSI SAS expander card backplane. And so there really isn't anything that could notice that something was amiss.
So why would that thing... So there are no sleds in it at all?
It shipped with 25 blank offs.
Why?
Because when people decommission enterprise storage hardware like this, they pull out all the hard drives, throw them in the shredder, and then wholesale sell off the chassis.
So they don't bother removing them from the sleds.
They're junking these things and selling them at like scrap metal value.
But
why would you sit there and take the 4 screws out of each one?
Then why are they going to the effort of putting the blanks back in?
That's the eBay seller marking it as a value add. If I had the option from the same seller, I could pre-populate this thing with 72 or 136 gig 10K RPM SAS drives if I wanted, but I didn't.
So you knew it didn't have sleds when you bought it?
I did, which is why I ordered sleds.
Ah.
Yeah. That being said, since this is a component in a storage appliance from HP, you would only ever buy the HP storage appliance hard drives to go in it, and you would never actually buy them and be part of your support contract. So the exact part number for the sleds for this is very unclear. I've taken the indistinguishable HP actual disk shelf, found the spare part for the sleds for it, and I think this is what we want. We're about to find out if I'm $40 in the hole.
So while you're doing that, I'll ask Jot. You said you're using 2 RTL SDRs for P25. Assuming that you are using DSD Plus, are you using the fast lane release?
No, that's just packaging. Well, it came with dry screws. That's nice.
Well, that's a value add.
Right?
Did I tell you the $40 I spent to buy hard drive mounting screws for 3-year-old HP like workstation class machines?
I vaguely recall something about some horror story with screws. I don't remember it being $40.
Yeah, $40. $40 to buy some of the SSD mounts and the 3.5-inch mounts because they're custom screws with rubber bumpers on them.
Oh yeah. For those noise suppressant stuff, it's hard for me to convince myself that wasn't a good deal.
No, it was a terrible deal, but there's no way to use regular screws.
That's the bad deal.
Yeah, the machines themselves were incredible deals, but the screws to mount drives in them. I mean, the one that is now my home server, it's a Haswell i7, 16 gigs of RAM, and it's their mid-tower case. It was designed to have like 1 extra hard drive internally, but I've hacked it together, so now it's just a little 4-drive RAID 10 setup.
There you go. So it does say 15K 72 gigabyte on it. So these clearly were the polls from someone else. I'm okay with that. So I'm hoping, even though these are because not only are these SAS SSDs, they're the 15 millimeter extra girthy. Yeah, right. So we're really gonna this is one of these as far as in things in this project, enterprise server hardware is one of these things that much like getting a commercial radio license, if you go online and read the forums, there's a lot of people saying a lot of things that as you gain just fractionally small amounts of understanding of the entire scope of the field, you very quickly realize that these people have no idea what they're talking about. And so the noise to signal ratio on these sorts of enterprise storage solutions online is just awful. So getting good intel on these beforehand was hard, and there was a lot of shooting in the dark here. Like my favorite when I was getting my commercial Part 90 license, I found some thread online that was adamant, because these two guys are adamant that if you filled out the Schedule 601 yourself, you could only apply for 5 frequencies, and you had to use a radio shop to apply for up to 15 frequencies. And if you wanted more than 15 frequencies, you had to fill out multiple Schedule 601Ds and pay the $165 multiple times. And I'm like, that just doesn't make any sense. Like, the Schedule 601D is just a big, like at the bottom of it's essentially like just a big, rows of like, frequency, radio class, number of radios, location. And so I just kept adding lines to it in their stupid online license, Schedule 601D builder wizard on the FCC's website. And I never stopped. And so 29 lines later, when I had applied for every itinerant frequency and submitted it, they approved it 36 hours later.
Nice.
So don't trust when you get to these real like boutique fields like enterprise hardware and commercial radio licenses and probably a lot of amateur radio. Not only don't believe what you read online, believe almost nothing of what you read online.
I feel like that's probably just good life advice.
There you go. Don't believe anything in life. Life is a lie.
The cake is a lie.
Yes, that is also true. All right. We're about to find out how bad I screwed up on this one. Huh? Ta-da!
Fits?
Yeah, it seems to fit. Cool.
Now you've got one problem.
Yeah?
You need 9 more drives.
Well, so I bought 12 sleds. And I've got 2 of the hard drives here, and I left the other 14 of them in in the data center. So but after the 16, yeah, I think I'm just gonna leave the rest of the bays empty.
So that chassis is nice and big.
It is.
That's a full depth chassis.
I think it's a look. Yeah, I mean it's effectively a full depth chassis.
Yeah. So there's got to be a lot of white space in there, or dead air, or sorry, void.
Yeah, I know. And yeah, like I know that like on the super micro disk shelves, it literally is their server chassis, except that the power supplies come out to this little power supply adapter board that literally is like just the power combiner. And then they've got a PCIe slot cover that brings the SAS connectors from the back plane up to out to the back accessory card slots. This one is a little bit more purpose built. So inside of it, you've got the power supplies, the power supplier combiner controller there, and then these parts here. Almost the entire space of there is actually taken up by the hot plug failover SAS controllers.
Oh, wow.
So from the back, this is the size of the actual. So this is the actual one of the 2 ports for the SAS controller itself, and it's that long, and it's got. I mean, it's a low density board in there, so they certainly were luxurious with their board layout. And then it comes back to a high-speed connector here that hot plugs onto the back plane of the 2.5 inch. drives.
Is the other port on there an Ethernet port?
It says MFG.
Or manufacturer?
Like
my
best bet is that it's like some sort of like
console.
Maybe console, probably like a JTAG diagnostic port or something. It's 10P10C, so it's not even the right number of pins for Ethernet. So I don't know what it is. And again, it's one of these things made by MFJ. I don't think so. But again, it's one of these things that like the only mention they ever make of the MFG port in their whole manual is support may ship you some device to plug into this MFG port. Follow their instructions. So I think this is very much a part of your support contract may include using this port. Needless to say, I have no support contract. And one thing I found super cute is they've got a little bracket in here that has on it a like Torx 10 Allen key.
Yeah.
I very much appreciate the style for when they use an unusual connector in here for like all the like cage attachments, and they include the tool for you right there.
And you know that really is one of the things in my limited time with enterprise hardware. All of it was all Oracle Spark stuff for the most part, and a bunch of Cisco gear. But the amount of attention to detail that went into the physical packages, the maintainability, the layout was impeccable.
Yeah.
You never see such thoughtfulness in consumer anything.
Yeah, it's a less brutal market, and I'm really okay with that. But what has really concerned me, and I've actually been talking to quite a few people about this, that whole like you can pick up 2 years ago stuff on eBay has been much less true as we've consolidated on these cloud providers, because like, you know, Amazon has their, I don't know, somewhere between 4 and 8 data centers spread across the US strategically. And when you consolidate everything into these single individual ultra data centers like that, they're much better at instituting things like very rigorous hardware disposal policies that include a shredder.
Yeah.
Right. And so you don't see a single Wedge 40 or Wedge 100, software to, open flow switch on eBay, because every single one of them is bought by Google, Amazon, or Facebook. And all three of them shred every single switch that leaves their data center because they all have hard drives on them that they don't want to leave their data center. So I've been talking to a couple people that claim that they can get me a good deal on an open flow 40 gigabit 48 port switch, or like 32 port switch. But I then ask them, like, okay, I would like to give you money for one of those. How soon can I get one? And then they go radio silent. So,
well, here's an open flow 48 for 1850.
1950?
1850.
1850, right? So I have people saying that they can get me a Wedge 40, which is like a 32 port QSFP plus switch. So that's 32 40 gig ports. I've got someone telling me they can get me one for $500.
Cool, get two.
Right, but
then, like you said, radio silence.
Yeah. Well, and there's also the fact that what in the world would I do with 40 gigabit?
Kenneth, let's be honest. We asked ourselves, what in the hell would you do with 10 gigabit?
Yeah, but the thing is, I have a friend that also gifted me an entire tray of 10 gig LR optics. So as long as I stick to SFP plus, all of the optics are free. All right. Cool. So it looks like I have guessed on the right on the sleds. And the thing with these sleds was it was a real hand-wringing moment because they're coming from China, and so the expected delivery date on these was 8 to 24 weeks. They showed up in two weeks. So it's one of those things. I didn't want to buy all 25 at once, because then I was going to be out $75 if they were the wrong sled, and I wouldn't want to try and turn them. And I didn't want to buy 2, because if they were the right sleds, I'd still be down for another 3 months waiting for the other 23 of them to come later. And so I opted for, I ordered just the bare minimum. Is I wanted, my initial plan for these is to have a 10 disc RAID 10 of these. So I can have 1 terabyte of VM disk image storage. So I did this as a compromise. I only ordered half of them. So now I can go back and order the other half. And I'm really happy.
Those will take the 8 weeks to get there.
Yeah, those will take like, yeah, right. But at this point, I figure I may as well own these sleds while I know I can still get them.
Yes.
I will eventually put 25 discs on a shelf. The fate of the shelf is drives will go in it and be used. And since this is going into my FreeNAS box on a 10 gig link, they may not even necessarily all be my drives. If someone else puts a server in there and wants a few 2.5-inch drives, I'll just give them an NFS mount on their drives.
Is NFS still the thing to do that with?
It's a thing I use. I see a lot of people using iSCSI instead. But like as far as like for exposing file systems at the file operation resolution, I certainly don't think of anything that replaced it. I mean, you have AFP on the Mac OS side, and you've got Samba, which has gotten damn good on the Windows side, but the 3 of them continue to coexist.
Okay.
All right. Shut up. Great. And the final question is, I also today got the M5 screws. So here's the other mistake that we made. There we go. It's all right. Try not to knock over the microphone. So I ordered this rack from Hurricane Electric, and we're in the United States, and it came with 4 threaded posts. So I'm like, okay, cool, great, threaded hole, 4-post rack, totally standard 1032 rack. So I go into my bag of rack mount screws. I've got like the English screws and the metric screws. All right, take my English screws, go over to the data center and start racking stuff up, and it works fine. Apparently, unbeknownst to me, I had at some point accidentally gotten a bag of 1224 screws instead of 1032. Those had somehow gotten into my English 1032 rack screw bag, and they happened to be the screws I pulled. And the 4-post racks at Hurricane Electric happened to be 1224, which is bigger than 1032. So unbeknownst to me, apparently, I've been using the new larger sized threaded post racks. As we have been collecting, we're up to something like 4 or 5 servers now. As we've been collecting all these things, we've now realized almost every server expects you to be in a square hole rack, not threaded, but square holes. We clearly should have ordered from Hurricane Electric when we signed this lease for this cabinet, opened a work order and said, please replace our threaded posts with square hole posts, because we now, on every single one of these servers, have to scrounge up their like threaded to square hole adapters. And like now we're paying attention to the data center when we walk in there, we realize, oh yeah, there's like other people here that have square hole racks, and like all their servers go in there real nice. But at this point, I've racked 4 servers and 160 pound router at the top of the rack. I don't want to take all that stuff off again to swap it out. And it's like, and the cage nuts I'd need for the stuff that needs threaded holes, it'd be about a watt. It's just, but Supermicro in particular does this, where their adapters expect you to have like an unthreaded clearance hole on the rack that you screw through into the little adapter plate that then exposes square holes.
So what is actually mating to the square hole?
It's a little clicky thing. It's a pair of, well, let's see if I can turn it around. Like on this one, it happens to be 2 clips that you push it through the square hole and it clicks, grabs the 2 sides of the square hole so it can't come out.
Okay. So it's robust enough to hold a 160-pound piece of network.
Well, it also had 2 studs on it that went through 2 of the other holes.
Oh, okay.
Right, so the studs went through the holes, and then this held it there. And every other server's got the same style. And these adapters show up, and they're expecting you to have like unthreaded round hole posts. And we're like, that's really weird. Like, I don't really want to drill out holes on Hurricane Electric's racks because that's kind of a shitty thing to do. And if I ever rearrange stuff, I'm going to have random holes in my rack that are unthreaded. Except that they all also expect you to be running M5 screws through them, which is a really weird size because like the metric racks are M6. And so it was like a really weird size until I finally realized the reason they use M5 is because M5, even though if you look at like the machinist handbook, it interferes by about 30 thou with how the thread fits. It can just barely kind of go through a 1224 like it's a clearance hole. Like you shave like maybe 20% of the thread off, but the 1224 underneath is still fine. But it fits through it like it's a clearance hole. And so I'm hoping that this rack is also using M5, which it doesn't really feel like it is. Because if that's the case, then I can just take this little grabby bit out and it kind of feels like if I force it, it might go in. Well, if that wasn't M5, it doesn't feel like it was M5, but it kind of feels like it's M5 now, yeah. Ooh. Gross. Well, if this... I'm really confused. The thing is, like, I tested this yesterday with a screw that I'm fairly certain was M5, and it did thread, so I don't know what this is if it's not M5. I don't know. We're gonna hack and whack it. I'm gonna get there. We're gonna improvise. It's not gonna happen this week.
Duct tape and baling wire.
Yeah, right. I mean, worst case, it sits on top of some other server, and I hope that the guy below me never has to unrack his server.
So wait, do you just have half a rack?
No, we've got a full 44U rack. And so 12U of it's taken up by the router.
Okay.
Then between this shelf, my NAS, and my hypervisor, I'm taking up about 5. And so we've been finding various other people with kind of the same sorts of objectives as us that are local and good friends with us, and getting them space in it as well.
Ah, gotcha.
Right.
You have tenants.
Yeah, right. But, I'm being real careful how I refer to them because
they're not. You can't sublease the rack.
I don't think there's any restrictions on me subleasing the rack. But the main problem is the IPv4 address space I'm using is AmperNet amateur IP space.
Oh, so then yeah, they can't use that.
Right, and so it's like I can't assign monetary value to the IP addresses, but you get some addresses for free with your co-location space. And a lot of these guys are bringing in their own AmperNet space. So, because the 44 net is one thing that is kind of really grossly underutilized by amateurs.
Yes.
Somewhat understandably, because it's really hard to use public IP space. Because I worked it out in the Bay Area of the 256 /24 subnets allocated to the Bay Area. And this is the Silicon Valley. There's currently 9 of them being advertised over BGP. Right, so there's 9 of 256 just in the Silicon Valley, and there's 255 other /16s allocated across the world. Of these 9, 5 of them are advertised from the same aisle as me, and so it's like 5 of them are advertised from this one group of like myself and one of my friends that helped me set up. And the other 4 are advertised from another data center. And so it's like, effectively 2 groups of people are using this address space at all.
So we have a couple of questions. Jeff says the last thing you bought on eBay. I don't know if he was asking you if that was the last thing you bought on eBay.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at it right now. I just dropped $300 on disc shelves. So
4 of them are Kenneth in different minutes. The last thing I bought on eBay would have been, I think, those HP screws.
Really?
Yeah, I don't honestly. I've never been a big eBay purchaser because I've been screwed over royally twice in the late 90s. Before, do you remember eBay before it was eBay.com?
Oh, like before PayPal? No.
Yeah. So before then, I had gotten into 70s vintage Canon film cameras. And I had an AE1 program that I loved. But it had a very known fatal flaw. The lubricant that they used for the shutter mechanism over time turns into gum, thereby slowing the shutter down. And there were people that would fix it, but at the time, living in rural Kentucky, the internet was new. Sending it to some random place in New York seemed scary. My band director in high school had absolutely fallen in love with eBay because he was buying all these old vintage brass instruments that nobody knew what they were, and then cleaning them up and turning them around for a tidy profit to musicians who understood the importance of the vintage of the horn.
Oh, back when the arbitrage was left in eBay and you could do that sort of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So he was like, "Oh yeah, eBay is great." So I get on there, I buy a Canon A1, which was Canon's flagship vintage camera from the late 70s, early 80s. And I paid like $450 for the body, and camera never showed up. And later I've gone to find out the same guy scammed 9 people.
Wow.
Out of $375 to $500 over that camera. And we never got restitution. And I mean, so one of the folks who got scammed on this actually was a fairly senior bureaucrat for the post office. And, so like we're trying to work the wire fraud and mail fraud and all this, that, and the other, but nothing ever happened of it. So that was the first time I really got burned. The second time I got burned was there was a period in my life when I had a project music recording studio for a fairly long period. And I decided to downsize it in 2 different phases. In the first phase, I had some mic pre's that I had purchased because I knew they were moddable. I know that it was very popular to replace the mic pre op amps in it, and then to do some tuning. It had a tube pre option as well. There was some tuning you could do there, and then retube. So I had done and power supply. There were power supply mods as well to filter and make things more stable. So I did all this work, and the thing was worth used about $300. If you had done a good job in the mods, you could get $450 for it. And I put one up for sale because I wasn't using them anymore. I sold it, and the guy PayPal'd me the funds, and I shipped it to him. And then like 2 days later, he disputed the transaction. And PayPal, particularly at that time, was pretty much always the customer, the buyer.
Oh, yeah, they still are. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I lost out on that. So just generally speaking, I've not given them a lot of my money. The only other thing I went on a tear for, and this is really silly. When I was in high school, there was a collection of, you remember Micro Machines?
Micro Machines, no.
Yeah, toys.
The name is vaguely familiar, but
they when the Star Wars movies were all being re-released in the late 90s, they released all these. They're like little replicas of ships and these little play sets with little tiny figures. But anyway, I went crazy and I collected all of them, and I bought most of those off eBay.
As you do.
Well, yeah. So just generally speaking, I've not been very pro eBay because I I've had really crappy things happen there.
Yeah, I mean, selling stuff on eBay just sucks. Like, I have to get good photos of it, and I have to upload it, and then I have to deal with stupid questions for a week and a half. And then, like, particularly since most of the stuff I'm trying to sell is amateur stuff, it then arrives at the other end, and it's hams dealing with it. And it's like, I've tried selling a few HF radios for like estates, and then like on this far end, like, tells me that the sensitivity's off on the 40 meter band. It misses the spec by 0.4 dB, and so it, the listing isn't as advertised, and he wants a 25% refund on the killer deal he got on this HF radio because it isn't actually functional like I listed it as. And I'm like, fine. So like if it's less than $100, I will usually err on the side of putting stuff in flat rate boxes and offering to people on Twitter for free, or dumpstering it over eBaying it, just because, like, if the margin's not really good for me as a seller, it's not worth it. And if it's something that I actually care about getting money for, I wouldn't list on eBay either. It's like, I'm about to go put this in a dumpster, except that it's worth too much for me to do that. So, but as a buyer, like, PayPal will always side with me if I get screwed on anything. So I'm more than perfectly happy to buy stuff on eBay.
I mean, part of the other one, I mean, like, so the funny thing is, you talk about this project for you started with somebody gave you a free server.
Yeah.
So nowhere near the same scale, but this black vertical thing here, is the first PC that I built in 13 years. I mean, I've been a dedicated Mac user until this year, when my Mac went Tango Uniform, and I don't have $3,000 to replace it. So, good friend, I don't know. Have you heard this story on the show already?
Yeah, the guy had like 2-year-old stuff that he never actually built up, and
he put it together, never got it working. The motherboard was damaged. So I had this really killer CPU and killer memory, and to buy a new old stock board was like $200, and I was almost willing to do it. I got an absolutely sweet deal on a Leon Lee case, because it was a new old stock case at Micro Center here that literally was an almost $200 case. Nobody bought it in 4 years, so it was on clearance for $60. But couldn't get it working. Returned the case power supply. Put a post out on Twitter. One of our listeners was like, "Oh, I got a motherboard for that," and so he sent it to me. And then what started off as my wife was like, "How much money are we into this free computer you got?"
I'm easily between Sean and me, we're easily above. I think we're close to $4,000 we've sunk on this project now.
Yeah, but if you look at what you have, that's nothing.
Yeah, it's the payback on this for our capabilities is going to be somewhere under a year.
You own part of the internet.
I do. It's super awesome. Oh, hey, speaking of someone who owns part of the internet,
the other media famous person.
Yeah.
I was actually just over at HE today, putting my rails in place.
Oh, there you go. Well, I wave at your guys' rack every time I walk by it. So,
okay, which one is yours?
55. So I'm 2 down from you guys.
Okay.
Yeah. Ours is the one.
I'll be right back.
Yeah. Ours is real easy to spot because it's the one with the retentive cable routing management on it. We've got every Ethernet cable in the whole rack is all bright red, and it all goes through zip loops on the side.
Gotcha. Yeah, I went looking around, but I couldn't figure out which one was yours because there are actually like 3 or 4 right in the vicinity that have 6500s.
Yeah, that's our whole entourage.
Okay.
Yeah,
it's you, Javi, and
several of his other friends. So I'm on the ACL for like 4 or 5 racks, and we all have 6500s or 7600s, which is nice because it means we all have kind of a common pool of spare parts for all that stuff, which is why I was able to pick up all sorts of spare parts already.
Gotcha.
You ever end up putting the beer fermenter? No, I did not put the beer fermenter in the data center rack. The free power was not worth it to save the heating bill. I did in fact brew the beer, and then the next day head to the data center. So in fact, that which I wanted to do in 1 day, I did in 2 days, and did not get kicked out of Hurricane Electric. But But so I don't know if you caught the stream or not, but here's my new 2.5-inch disc shelf to go in my rack. So my NAS is now going to have 12 3.5-inch bays for bulk storage, and then I've got.
Do they just have a bunch of SAS connectors on the back?
This one, yeah, this has got two SAS controllers, and then I've got a PCIe SAS controller that's going to go in the NAS, and then another friend gifted me 16 enterprise SSDs. So
that's a good friend to have.
Right, they're 200 gigabytes, which is kind of that awkward line where they're low density, but they're high enough density that an array of 10 of them gets me something useful, and I can rationalize it. Right, I can rationalize it that 10 drives RAID 10 of SSDs is a pretty stupid fast array, but it's still only 1 terabyte. So, but something free SSDs. So
yeah,
I'm leaving 15 bays open. So if I ever come up with better SSDs, I can put them in and migrate.
You could also just have them available as JBOD and do like RAID Z or something if you wanted to experiment with that.
I mean, I could. I'm mainly doing this also because I badly need to get all my VMs off of spinning disks. So, right, because I've got 4 2-terabyte blue drives that I've got 10 VMs sharing with all of my web server traffic, and so needless to say, anything operating system related takes a long time. Yeah.
Did you end up with ESXi or Proxmox? I don't remember.
ESXi, and then I bought a separate box for FreeNAS. So
okay,
yeah. So I reflashed. So ESXi on my hypervisor 1U. I reflashed the RAID controller in it from being a target originator to back to the RAID firmware and LSI. And so I've got two 300 gig 10K SAS drives in the ESXi host RAID 1 hardware, with 1 VM on it that gives me remote SSH access to the whole rack. And so if the FreeNAS box wigs out and all of my other VMs disappear, I can still SSH into this 1 VM and then IPMI down to the FreeNAS box to remotely fix the FreeNAS box to mount it to boot the rest of my VMs. Has in fact already come in handy. I managed to crash the NFS server on FreeNAS.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah, I felt pretty clever for not having to drive the 4 blocks over the data center.
Yeah, anytime you don't have to do the walk of shame, it's good.
Right. Although
I did. Go ahead.
I am getting a little concerned because the thing is I'm signing into the data center once every week and a half, and it's I'm there every week almost, because we're getting this stuff one thing at a time. And once I've spent, once one of us has spent $600 on a server, we really want to get it online right now, and so we're showing up one server at a time at 10-day intervals, and I'm getting really self-conscious. At some point they're going to tell us, stop showing up so often.
What else are they doing?
It's their day job to sit there and sign me in. So it's I keep telling myself it's okay, but
yeah.
So
I don't think they care.
Yeah.
Speaking of stupid walk of shame stories, for my first client when I was a consultant in DC, I was a manager of the infrastructure group and the software group. And I mean, we're small teams. The infrastructure group was like a DBA, a chief sysadmin, a junior sysadmin. Not like 4 people total. And then development group was significantly larger, but our chief systems guy, stupid smart, absolutely stupid smart, really got it. Was one of those guys who believed it was his job to automate himself out of a job. They had very strong views on correct versions of architecture, which were generally 2 to 3 decades ahead of what was acceptable in the federal climate. And that got him in trouble. And so we mutually agreed that it was time for him to go. But this all happened very quickly while we were going from a data center consolidation from 6 racks of federally funded research and development centers, literally getting virtually unlimited budgets to go buy whatever hot new technology there was 5 years ago that was completely unnecessary, and pulling out about 85% of the equipment to go send off for federal auction, and then consolidating down to a single high density rack. Part of this, of course, was moving all the network, which I know Jack Diddley about networking. I had previously
packets go in, packets go out. You can't explain that really.
Yeah, I know. Well, no, there's something in the box that makes the light blink. I know that.
Yeah, there you go.
Dust blinking lights in. But anyway, the only Cisco work I'd ever done in my life professionally was I had done some rudimentary like PIX firewall configuration stuff. But I didn't know anything about routers. And so we get everything moved over, everything comes back up, and all the network routes are still in place. It's actually funny. Do you guys know Nick Garner?
The name's vaguely familiar.
Pignology?
No.
So Nick is a good friend. He's one of the Baynet members. Nick is good friends with George. Nick, I became aware of him because he started a company selling these little Wi-Fi to serial bridges or adapters for remotely controlling radios with your iPhone or whatever. So it's basically a Wi-Fi access point that has a serial bridge on the other side of it. Anyway, it came in really handy. Came in really handy while I was on the back side of the rack and didn't have a cable that could reach to the terminal ports on the switches or routers. So, anywho, everything's working great. Couple weeks later, there's a little performance issue with one of the VLANs, blah, blah, blah. I go in and start touching the main router and manage to accidentally delete the route that allows connections coming in from the internet to go through everything else.
It's not the good route to delete. You don't want to delete that one.
No, that's that's probably why they put it at the top.
Yeah.
So I had to drive to the data center and fix that one. I was not proud.
Yeah.
I had a maintenance window when I was working at Cuesta College. We had a Cat 6500 running Soup 2s, not 2Ts, Soup 2s for the originals from like 1999. And the system was running in hybrid mode, which meant it was running iOS on the router portion and CatOS on the switch portion. So I was thinking, okay, this is terrible. I'm going to convert this to native mode, which is all iOS.
Sorry.
So I wrote up a config. I went and got it all converted, got it ready to go. Went in one night at like 10 o'clock and rebooted the switch, set it up, had it come up in native mode with the new configuration. And the one part of my config that hadn't converted properly were the port channel configs. So the port channel is a link aggregation of 2 or more Ethernet links. And if you don't have them configured right, you instead of one like big trunk that's 2 or 3 or 4 links wide, there are 2 or 3 or 4 separate links connecting the same switches, one switch to another switch, all on the same VLAN. And so I ended up creating loops to every switch on campus, which did not, and none of the switches had an air disable timeout. I had to go and visit every single closet on campus.
Oh, man.
I was out there until like 1:30 in the morning.
How big was the campus? Big enough?
It's big enough. There were like 30 switches I had to go touch.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Because Cuesta College is, I don't know, it's like a decent, pretty good size. Are they a community college?
Yeah, it's about 10,000 full-time equivalent community college.
Yeah, so it's a pretty sizable campus.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is why I do all this stuff hobbyist on my own with only exactly one rack to my name.
Yeah, I learned many a lesson that night.
My my
It
my
could have
my
been worse.
yeah, my day job is being an electrical engineer.
Yeah.
I am no longer a network engineer at my day job, so I may as well.
But you
Do
could
it.
play one if you had to.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, networking is definitely the black magic and voodoo of all this IT stuff.
I don't know, man. That internet's the future. It really is. I think it's going to go somewhere. So
I still think it's a flash in the pan.
I've been doing it forever. I started an ISP in 1999.
Yeah. That's the one thing I am kind of pissed about, having gotten getting into networking in 2017. I really clearly missed the ball on almost all this stuff, because it's like I know a dozen people that back in the 90s started their own ISPs and got their own private IP allocations and have their own personal autonomous system. Like all the stuff that I'm paying hundreds of dollars for, they have just laying around for free, because back in the 90s this stuff was just handed out.
Yeah.
So
I
really
got in. Go ahead.
I really feel like I missed it by about 25 years for getting into it and having all the nice perks everyone else has.
Yeah, I missed it by about 5 years.
Right.
I mean, I was there sort of. My first job. So oddly enough, so my introduction to ham radio and my introduction to IT both came from a gentleman by the name of Keith Pennington, whose call sign used to be KA4ROS. He upgraded to Extra. He's got a 1 by, I don't know his new call sign. But when we were in high school, we were all sitting around. His son was one of my best friends, and we were all sitting around one Saturday, and he's talking about, this internet thing. And this was like 97. And wouldn't it be great if we could have this internet thing? But man, dial-up internet's awful slow. Wouldn't it be great if we could have like T1 speed? And so he convinced his wife to let him build a 48-channel dial-up ISP in his basement so he could have a T1 into his house and it'd be paid for.
That would be pretty nice.
So that was my first job, was building an ISP.
Yeah.
I know people that did that. They started out with Portmaster 2s that just have a bunch of DB25s on the back and just huge numbers of modems sitting there. I think they eventually upgraded to PM3s.
I'm going to say everything we had. I don't remember what terminal controllers we had, but everything were nice US Robotics, racked, digital. I think it was four channels per card.
Yeah. So when I posted my blog post about hey, I've made my own autonomous system, and this is the rough outline of how to do it, I had about 3 people in the comments essentially just get triggered on post-traumatic stress of back in the 90s, going into his this one guy goes on this rant about he's not a real ISP. I had to go back and as a consultant, I had to go in and solve these basements with hundreds of modems, and that was a real ISP. He doesn't have any customers, and the guy goes off. And I finally I responded back to the comment dude, I didn't really say that I was an ISP. I said I was an autonomous system. Hackaday changed the title to something more clickbait. And he's like, oh, I actually didn't read the article. I'm like, I'm good on you. Good on you for admitting it.
Yeah.
Man.
Kenneth, what's an autonomous system?
So an autonomous system is
it's a system that's autonomous.
Yeah, it is the logical grouping of subnets on the internet. And so Comcast home internet is a network, right? And on the customer side, they have their handoffs at your cable modem.
Yep.
And then on the upstream side, where they get you your internet from some other supplier, the autonomous system is the delineation between all of Comcast is one autonomous system, and level 3, which is a different network that gives them transit, is a different autonomous system. And in very specific places, those two autonomous systems meet and typically speak BGP, which is a routing protocol, to trade routes between them. And so when I say that I'm my own autonomous system, it means that I'm not a co-location customer running on Hurricane Electric's network. I am my own network that happens to get most of its internet transit from Hurricane Electric. But there's nothing tying me to Hurricane Electric other than them providing it to me.
And screws.
And screws.
Literally screws.
Yeah. Hurricane Electric's real nice, but they have these little bags of screws scattered across their whole data center.
I found the screws today.
Right, top right drawer in every workball in the whole building.
Yeah. No screwdrivers though, but
they always ask you when you walk in the door, "Hey, do you need any tools?"
They didn't ask me. They just asked if I needed a cart for my box. But I called up and they brought out a couple of screwdrivers.
There you go. Yeah. But so since I'm my own autonomous system, I can blend my own internet and not only depend on Hurricane Electric. Obviously, I'm not willing to pay for a whole separate transit route from someone else, but I can set up lateral peering links and shave off fractions of my internet to other people. And so I managed to negotiate a free peering link with Nick. And so we sit there with this peering link that goes between our two racks with 110 bits per second of traffic, which is the hellos between our two routers staying still alive. Although, about once a day or so, I see about 100 kilobytes come from your guys' rack onto mine. Something sends me about 100 kilobytes of traffic, and I have no idea what it is.
I'm gonna need to start capturing net flow off the router.
Yeah, I've been meaning to set up net flow as well to do packet captures, because I'm sitting there like every once in a while there's a big spike, and I'm like, it's not updates because neither of us have any update policies.
Big spike.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Relatively speaking.
Yes. But I set up a peering link with our other friend Javier on the same aisle, and he's actually feeding me most of SF Mix, which gets me about 2,000 routes, including Google. And so when Google bots crawling my websites, it doesn't use my main transit; it uses this lateral link.
So SF Mix will take another AS behind.
SF Mix's route servers are totally unprotected. They don't check IRRs. They don't check prefix links. They will take anything you give them.
That's nice.
And yeah, SF Mix is they are tagged on the Peering Internet Exchange database as these are one of the 8 schmucks in the world that don't really have their act together. But considering what SF Mix.
These are the people that enabled Cogent's terrible business practices in the past.
Yeah, that sort of thing. But and I understand where SF Mix is coming from. They're trying to be a low overhead internet exchange, and the fact that I can't get a free port on them, but I have friends who can get free ports on them, I certainly appreciate them for what they're trying to do. But it means that I have about 3 to 5% of my traffic doesn't go over my main transit link. It goes sideways between Google and Wave and Cloudflare, all these people that happen to be on this internet exchange sideways. I effectively have 1 gig plus a little bit more, depending on where you're going. So an autonomous system is some network that sets their own policies on the internet.
That's pretty awesome.
It has been an interesting, I guess it's 4 months now that I've taken a crash course in Cisco routing. Right, because 4 months ago I had never interacted with a Cisco router.
And finally realized that, oh my God, BGP is just, all things are horrible.
Once I saw an example of this is what you're actually trying to do, it is remarkably simple. And not in really good ways, in very kind of scary.
Yeah.
This is all it is.
From the standpoint of, oh, so that's why it's so ridiculously easy for people to accidentally inject routes into the internet and redirect YouTube to, Yugoslavia.
Right.
or wherever it was that happened.
But it's fascinating. So like, so for example, like all of my address space is all borrowed from other people. And so for me to announce the address space to Hurricane Electric, I have to get a letter of authorization from the actual owner of the address space. Now, Jeremy, how thorough do you think the letters have to be and all of the back checking that needs to happen for me to be able to take addresses that someone else owns, and IPv4 addresses are worth something like what, $20 an address now. So we're talking about me taking more than $1,000 a month worth of addresses and advertising them on my network. How much back checking do you think? How much paperwork do you think there's involved in that?
It's either going to be a ton or nowhere near enough.
One-page letter. To whom it may concern. I, company name, authorize Kenneth Finnegan, company name, to advertise this subnet. Signature. I scanned it, sent it in.
Yep, that's what we had for our IP space as well.
Right, and that's it.
It is pretty awesome, though, being able to, go and take a full feed and start playing around with stuff where most people on like our home lab are, grabbing up a couple of 2800s and 3560s and, doing a little network at home. It's like, well, we're taking 50,000 routes and
yeah. As I had wrote the our home lab guys always kind of weirded me out. Is those guys were always like I saw a lot of kilowatt hours go to die on home lab that were not justified. Like these people that are spinning up these like 8 or 10 like what are they like the 2950 Dells, like the generation before
the 1950 and the 2950s. Those are
yeah.
Most people have gotten away from those. They're usually the R710 seems to be the most common, with the R720 coming into use, because the R710s are just a couple $100.
Yeah, so like they're getting a little bit more prevalent. But like when I see these people spinning up these racks of like more than 2 kilowatts worth of servers, and they're using the standard, somewhat credible R home lab just because rationale, I find that a little challenging. Like when I want to spin that sort of stuff up just because, I do 1, maybe 2 servers. These guys are racking up 15 servers and running them. And like,
well, if they're doing actual experiments with, clustered VM systems and things like that, it sure,
right? But they're not. All I'm hearing all I'm seeing in the comment section is, well, I got my hands on 8 of these on Craigslist, and look at me now, tape ruler.
Zip
and I'm sitting there, right? Don't look at me. I just started my own autonomous system. Whatever.
I've just got my one R720 with a, GPU in it and a bunch of RAM and disks, and
that's really about all you need. Like honestly, if I could have settled on a hypervisor I was happy with, if I had figured out some good way to get storage and hypervisor in one box, that would have been all I had. But I really found the ESXi and separate storage host thing appealing. So I'm really hoping that beyond these 5U I've got, I'm maybe going to add one more hypervisor as a like everyone else freebie VM hosting service at some point. So that people that want to spin up high bandwidth reflectors or something can do it. But I'm hoping that's about it.
So I'm going to step away for a minute. When I get back, I've got a great question for you.
All right.
We probably have a terrible answer.
Oh, certainly a snarky one.
Oh, I know it'll be snarky.
Yes.
But I want to pull on a thread that I very briefly waved in front of your face once. But yeah, I'll be back in a few minutes.
Yeah. There we go.
Go away or I'll call the peanut gallery. I'm on the peanut gallery.
I'm leaving the peanut gallery in charge.
Yeah, can you imagine that? God.
Statler and Waldorf are my spirit animals.
You know, that's exactly what Mark said at the beginning of the stream. He introduced himself as the first half of the pair. Oh man. So, what are you? I guess you're in the area now, and you're going to Baycon tomorrow as well.
Yep, I'm in the what is it, Courtyard Marriott across from where HRO used to be. So right on the other side of Lawrence.
Oh, right. Oh, over there on Lawrence.
Yep.
Yeah, okay, got it. Cool. You hear that, live streamers? If you want to go creep on his hotel right now.
Yeah. I went over to get some pho over in the shopping center there. I'm like, God, this looks really familiar. And as I'm driving out, it's like, oh, hey, look, the husk of HRO.
Right.
This place was familiar.
Yeah. I always recognize it by the St. John's because I've eaten there so much. So I always found the St. John's had a more notable sign than HRO anyways. So, but yeah, I'm sadly not going to be there tomorrow. I'm flying to Mexico tomorrow morning. So
I see how it is.
Right. Week trip down to Oaxaca for a nonprofit organization called Kids on Computers. We're building computer labs for, primary schools. So
cool.
And for some reason, I was like, they were sitting there on the conference call for a half hour waffling about who really wanted to spend the $1,500 on 25 Raspberry Pis. And I finally said, well, I've got an Amazon Prime card. So I'm like, oh, me. I'll buy the Raspberry Pis. 5% back.
Nice.
So I've got 25 Raspberry Pis as my carry-on luggage.
I was wondering what those were for. Okay.
Right. So yeah, we're going to deploy those down in Oaxaca. So
nice. I'm trying to figure out if I want to drop by Fry's or not and see if they have any Tinker boards there. Because, of all the single board computers I have sitting around, I don't have any that are based on the Cortex A17.
Yeah, you got to collect them all with those Cortex.
Yeah, got to get all the different cores.
Yeah, right. I mean,
I have A7, A8, A9, A15, A50 or A53s.
Yeah. I think I threw away a few of my old Beagles last month.
Yeah.
Right. So what I pulled out a BeagleBone once in like the last 3 years, and that was for that was before I got my our console server. I was going to build like a 4-port TTL to RS-232 adapter, and so I spent an hour and a half trying to get these serial ports to come online on the pin muxers, and I never could figure it out. So. Right, the thing is, like, the worst part is I've done it before. Like, I've done exactly what I was trying to do. It's just that they've changed to the hardware abstraction layer in Linux.
The device tree overlay stuff.
Yeah, like that stuff has changed like 3 times fundamentally since I last used the Beagle. So, fine. Raspberry Pis have better documentation.
I've got a BeagleBone Black that's acting as my CNC router controller. PRUs are perfect for that.
Right, like that's exactly what they're meant for.
The problem is the graphics in it, or the graphics engine in it, is just terrible.
Yeah,
so the UI that it presents is like,
painted,
slow. It's slow as hell.
Yeah, but yeah, I finally picked it up, but I haven't installed it. So this is our 2511 console server. Right, so. 16 8P8C RS-232 ports.
Is that an AUI port or a HISTI port?
Yeah, that's an AUI port. So to get Ethernet onto it, I have to use a separate little transceiver that goes between the D sub 15 and the 10 base T Ethernet. Which between this and your guys' fast link to your router, I've about collected them all as far as Ethernet speeds in my rack. So
now you just need to run some ThinNet.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I mean, if we stuck a piece of ThickNet up in the rack, they wouldn't notice, right? Every networking guy walking by is, oh my god, that's a piece of ThickNet up in the. Yeah. And this is why I very deliberately, I knew this was coming at the beginning, so we set our rack back like 4 inches. because Javier made the mistake of not setting his rack back. And so he has 0 bend radius after his RJ45 on the door.
You get like a right angle one.
Yeah, we need to hook him up with one because it pains us. I mean, every time we have to.
Oh, that's terrible.
Right. But sadly, the 2511 is old enough; it doesn't have SSH. So our remote access is going to be over Telnet, which is not ideal. But
I have returneth.
No.
Yes. Yeah. Back on your behavior.
Yeah. So I was showing Nick, just to recap for you. This is the console server I have for my rack. So it's a Cisco router. It's the 2511. Ethernet is over AUI, which is a 10 megabit Ethernet thing. And it's got 16 RS-232 ports in AP8Z form. So
you can remotely access all your console ports.
Yeah. So those will all be plugged into that. So it'll be one of like the 4 different ways to remotely access and admin all of our systems then.
All right. So here's my question.
Shoot.
A little bit of background. So there was at Tapper this year, guy involved with the National Weather Service talking about the need for expanding data collection for weather data. Talked about some of the challenges of using APRS, etc.
Oh, this is it like DCC?
Yeah.
Okay. Yep.
So, Gary KN4AQ from Ham Radio Now usually goes and records a lot of these sessions, makes them available for free online. Yeah, I thought the talk was really interesting. It was broken into 2 parts. Part 1 was talking about basically RF data standards and, in his mind, the need to create something. And then part 2 was about building new weather stations. One of the best things I learned from this was that I have no business putting a weather station at my location because I can't do it according to best practices. My HOA probably wouldn't let me anyway. But my question, I'd asked you what your thoughts about an extensible schema or protocol were, and you said APRS is plenty extensible now.
Yep.
I wanted you to elaborate on that.
So, first of all, as far as weather stations, there is a weather station packet format.
There is, and one of his biggest condemnations was that nobody in the APRS community consulted with anybody who knew anything about weather when they designed it.
Yes. Yeah. It's got stuff like, rain since midnight. And it's
not enough decimal, not enough precision in temperature reading.
So I wasn't aware of that anyone that actually knew anything. I didn't know how deficient that protocol spec was as far as our weather packet. But okay, so that's good to know that it's actually awful. Doesn't surprise me. With that being said, every APRS packet is defined by the first character in it. Right. And so when you see a packet that starts with an exclamation point or an equal sign, you know that it's a GPS location packet. And then based on the second character, the first chunk of that is either a north-south latitude and then a east-west longitude, or it's like a base 92, which was invented by APRS, like base 64 sort of encoding, but they figured 92 got them got shaved one character off it. So instead of using an industry standard encoding for binary data, they came up with their own. And then there's a comment field. And in that comment field, in position packets, they have defined all sorts of different, what are they officially called? Data extensions. And so if you want to encode your heading and velocity in a position packet, there's a certain syntax for 3 digits, a / and 3 digits, encodes your heading and velocity in degrees from north and knots. And if you stick that in there, it's added to the packet. if you want to encode your altitude, there's this format to put in the comment section of like uppercase A equals and numbers in feet from ground level. And then like the high altitude balloon guys, they looked at that and they're like, well, telemetry is a separate packet, right? Because there's the T telemetry packet that gives you 5 analog values, which are stupidly 0 to 255, and then 8 binary values. They said, well, that's great, but in our high altitude balloons, we don't have the power budget for 2 packets. And so they actually defined a pipe, compressed data, and then another pipe in the comment field of the position to map to the telemetry values. They defined it. Heizu on APRS.fi implemented it, so he parses it correctly, and they added that to the spec.
How big is the comment field?
I think officially it's 34 characters. Realistically, I worked out the math, and I think it could be 160. It's like one of these things that, like, the MTU of AX25 is 255 or 256 bytes. Once you factor in the overhead of third-party packets, APRS packets are limited to 192 characters, and then you factor in the length of the actual like position packet prefix, and it's something shorter than that, right? So it's like 160 characters that you could have in the comment section and still call it a somewhat valid APRS packet.
So we could have done Twitter over APRS.
Absolutely. The reason that they...
Not anymore.
Yeah, not anymore, right? So like messaging is an example, right? So the message length limit on APRS is 67 characters. And I brought this up as an argument 2 years ago on the mailing list and made them clarify that when they said 67 characters, they really meant 67 bytes. And they came back and said, no, it's 67 characters. And the reason that they picked 67 as the length limit on the SMS messaging in APRS is because on a PC DOS 80 by 24 monitor, the call sign, timestamp, and cursor caret takes up the first 13 characters on the 80 column monitor. And so there's only 67 characters left to display the message.
And I'd like to repeat that you do not believe we need a more flexible, extensible standard.
I believe that if you find some legitimate need, like if the weather telemetry packet is grossly insufficient, and it would not at all be hard to convince you that it is, because the spec for it is awful. Of all the APRS packet prefix designators, we've used all of about 14 of them, and it's all of ASCII. And so if you were to say uppercase W, any packet that starts with uppercase W is this new Weather 2.0 spec, and we were to have actual weather station guys define some ASCII encoding that actually achieves what they want, I would say that the only person that you really need to get buy-in from on that is Heizu to implement on APRS.fi. All of the APRS IS infrastructure and all of the iGates and all the digiputers are supposed to, and most of them do, just pass whatever string you carry over APRS for whatever it is. And so it's perfectly extensible. I would recommend against trying to transport raw binary data over it. But then again, like we've been hammering on this for about the better part of a decade now to try and get UTF-8 over it. And so it's getting pretty good at handling binary data anyways. Right? Because like the big problem was some of the iGates were TNCs in like monitor mode where it would like print out on the console to you as a human from this call sign with this header. They said this. People were trying to back parse that human readable like conversation from the TNC and iGate that. That's why they had the limitations of like you couldn't have a pipe symbol in an APRS packet was because that pipe symbol would switch the mode on the TNCs that were eye gates, right? And so that's why
plus
the APRS
ATH.
Yeah, right. Like the pipe character on any APRS packets would crash the eye gates, and that's why it happened to be skipped over on all sorts of stuff like the base 91 encoding and the symbol characters. They all skip over the pipe and the tilde because they would crash the eye gates. But when the high altitude balloon guys were developing their compressed binary telemetry thing, which is a pipe and then 2 to 10 characters and another pipe, they just said, to hell with it. Like, this pipe character makes it way easier to parse it because we know that it's not going to show up anywhere else. And it makes it really clear that this is some sort of block of data. And if anyone's running a TNC2 iGate in 2011 or whatever, their iGate deserves to crash anyways. So they just kind of blew them off on the mailing list. And the guys on the mailing list, cried bloody murder. And they've been running these high altitude balloons now for 5 years, and they work perfectly fine. Right. And so, like, a lot of the legacy problems they've been dealing with have gone away. But since there is absolutely no depreciation, deprecation policy or mechanism or pathway on anything APRS, it all just hangs out.
And then add to that if any, I mean, I guess you have the problem of the entrenchment problem, right? People already have hardware out there. It's an appliance. They're not. It's just there. They're not going to take the effort to upgrade or.
Well, the people who are like the radio in their car as an appliance, those guys aren't nearly as bad as most of the routing policy changes in APRS were hampered by the fact that the digipeaters on mountaintops had UV EEPROMs in them. Because like for DigiNet, which was one of the real popular, UIDigi? UIDigi. It was one of the real popular digipeater software packages. It was a little shell script that compiled the binary with your call sign and all of your digipeater config settings that you burned onto an EEPROM and stuck in your TNC2. And so these guys would burn the EEPROM, put it in their DNC2, put it on the mountaintop. 10 years later, they would throw away all their EEPROM burner stuff because, the PC happened. And then 5 years after that, they would die, and their digipeater would keep going. And so many of the high-level digipeaters out there for a long time were operated by people that were, by call signs of people that were dead, and continued to operate primarily just because, like, it was, the amateur rack that was kind of, a $0 a month lease sort of stuff. And so the site owners all just kind of ignored the amateur rack. And so some of these digipeaters ran for 15, 20 years on inertia. And so that's the sort of thing that they're up against, trying to change routing policies on APRS. Right. And then you also have the problem that most of the people designing the protocol aren't protocol designers and don't deal with any other protocols. And so when I'm fighting stuff with them about, like, guys, you say that we support UTF-8, but you also say that the APRS message is 67 characters. 67 emoji is more than 256 bytes. It's like 267 bytes for 67 emoji. And you're saying that's perfectly valid, but it doesn't even fit in an AX25 frame.
Well, I mean, that's just like the laws with data rates, right? As far as rates were characterized as speeds as opposed to, am I getting that right? Like 300 baud is a speed limit on HF when they could have easily said something else, or they should have said bandwidth used.
Yes, exactly. Because at the time, Gaussian minimum shift keying wasn't really a thing. And so since RTTY operated at 300 baud and RTTY stayed in about 2.5 kilohertz of bandwidth, they said, that's a good benchmark to use. We're going to limit everyone to 300 baud. Right, which is why you now see these, like the free TV guys, their HF codec is absolutely goofy because they're limited to 300 baud, but they built their modem as each symbol is actually, it's like 16 separate carriers across the 2.5 kilohertz bandwidth, and so it's 300 baud with 16 symbols at a time. That actually gives you a pretty good, decent data rate, right? So they're getting like more than a kilobit out of these modems just because each symbol encodes like 15 or 14 bits worth of data.
The joy of baud versus bit.
Right, baud versus bit versus bandwidth. And the FCC should have gone with bandwidth. But this is a holdover from the time when amateur power limits were 3 kilowatts into the plate of your final amplifier. Because back in the
work so good today.
Right, it doesn't work so good. But you do understand the reason why the limit was 300 watts or 3 kilowatts into the plate.
Because amps are about 50% efficient? I don't know.
No, it was because good, high quality, high precision RF power meters weren't really a thing.
Oh.
And so you couldn't realistically expect an amateur to be able to monitor their RF output power, where DC current meters are very good. And so it was all right, here's your final plate, only put so much power into it, and regardless of what your efficiency was, whatever comes out on the outside power-wise is acceptable because you're only putting 3 kilowatts in. Right? And so it wasn't that they were, okay, it's about 50%, so it'll limit them to 1.5 kilowatts. The 1.5 kilowatt concept didn't exist yet.
Okay.
And it was just that they picked a metric that was realistically useful for hams at the time. Right. And so 300 baud is of that exact same lineage of it was a realistic metric for hams at the time because you could not afford a spectrum analyzer in the amateur scope of work.
Hi, John.
Oh, hey, look at that. He managed to come in right on the end of like the 15 most interesting minutes of the whole stream.
I'm going to John log into Twitter. I'll see if computers are hard.
They are, particularly when you're trying to like do two things at once, like live stream and computer.
I'm actually going to drop off and got to get up early tomorrow for Bacon.
All right.
Live tweet a lot for those of us who can't be there.
Yes.
I'm going to be prepping for winter field day tomorrow.
I'm gonna be in the air, so when I land, I'll be real excited to open it up and see all your guys'. Yeah.
Very good. All right. Bye.
All right. Good night, Nick.
See you, Nick. Boy, this really shows how excited I am about packing that I've managed to cycle through 2 other guests already.
Well, the other thing that's awesome is you've actually unpacked far more than you've packed. So yeah, John, go look on Twitter. I just sent you a link. You can join us if you should so desire.
Yeah.
All right, so here's the part 2 then. Okay, so we have old thinking as a problem.
Mm-hmm.
We have entrenched infrastructure that, while a pain in the butt, because like you said, a lot of it is, or maybe that problem's fixed, but in theory, a lot of it, there's inertia for it not to change.
Yeah, right. But the thing is, almost all that infrastructure is layer 2.
Okay.
And if you're talking about you want a new weather station data format, that's not a layer 2 problem. That's not a routing policy. That's not a routing addressing.
No, that's all content.
Right. That's layer 3. And I am under the impression that we have done a pretty good job of getting APRS 8-bit clean and pretty layer 3 agnostic. There was a few iGate developers that were pretty adamant they wanted to try and parse every packet and validate its syntax before they iGated it. And we managed to get them to cut that out because, inevitably they weren't developing stuff as fast as the working group was, and their users weren't deploying them as fast as they were developing them. And so I think we've done a pretty good job of getting it that iGates, the infrastructure doesn't try and understand what you're transporting over APRS.
Gotcha.
So the only thing really limiting you on developing some new data encoding and moving it over APRS is that you don't want to piss anyone else off. So don't like reuse some other field that other people are parsing. And don't go over the maximum length limits, I guess. I mean, it's...
Well, I mean,
like
if you do, your mileage may vary.
Right. You know, but like APRS spec even includes like a user custom, like you're like for all these, like I'm making some custom, you know, packet markup. You're supposed to use like a double open tilde or open curly brace, and then you're supposed to allocate some character from Bob for you as a developer or something. But I think he's allocated all of about 3 of those. And honestly, if you were to start using some random packet identifier tag, as long as you didn't expect anyone else to, you know, not use it for something else, and you ended up with a pretty good argument after a relatively limited beta test that you kept under control. Realistically, no one should have a problem with it.
So, because yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, if the argument that they're making is, okay, our needs are woefully underserved, we believe the APRS network has been incredibly valuable in getting data because it has become so prevalent. You know, because again, this was a DCC, right? So the audience is all getting keyed up, and what's nice is there's a lot of people in there trying to apply modern thinking. So, you know, now, you know, people moving towards, say, JSON over RF.
Okay.
So, because I mean, when people were talking about extensible, they were talking about we should have a format that is self-describing. You know, it's encapsulated.
Great. That's not APRS.
No, it's not. No.
Right. Yeah. Like you can't put JSON on APRS. Like that is unreasonable.
Yeah. John, I see you joined. Are you actually there?
Yeah.
You are. You're muted.
Hello, I'm here.
Now you're unmuted.
Now I'm unmuted. Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt the conversation.
You
I
have
just see if you guys can start over again because I just barely saw this. So if you can just back up really fast, let me know what I missed.
So we're talking about APRS and how I'm adamant that APRS is an extremely extensible protocol since it's so Wild West. And if people want to develop new like data markups to put over APRS, they pretty much can just go do it. As long as they try and be a little bit political about not coming in and saying that APRS is crap like every other developer that comes in and does that, because that garners zero support from all of us that actually develop APRS.
Oh, okay. Okay, I'm up to speed.
Right.
Go ahead. Resume.
So, just out of curiosity, John, have you seen or listened to these 2 episodes from Ham Radio Now? The Citizen Weather from the 2017 DCC?
I think I'm still on day 1. I got to the video where they called for a complete digital revolution, I believe.
Revolution. That sounds fancy. I want to be a part of that.
Where they don't want to accept D-Star, DMR, or Fusion. They want the DCC to come up with a ham format.
Jesus.
Oh.
That's as far as I've gotten in the shows.
I'm gonna have to check that one out.
I managed to come up with a new policy. Like I finally managed to solidify my policy on digital radio, which makes this argument really easy. Every time someone asks me what my favorite digital radio mode is, I only use digital radio when I'm getting paid for it. I use DMR networks up in San Francisco for paid events, and it's pretty miserable dealing with digital voice codecs. But when I'm getting paid for it, it's not so bad.
Why do you think it's miserable? Do you not like the fidelity, or do you not like the complication, or?
I have 2 main complaints with digital radio. My first main complaint with them is that the syllable-based encoding that they're doing is very noticeable to me, and I find it relatively challenging to understand even good fidelity audio over it. So like in its ideal situations, I find it a little bit difficult to understand the robotic tone of people over it, right? Because it's not just a good audio compression like MP3 is. It's really kind of breaking down, vocalizations into its constituent parts a bit more, right? Which is why when people talk about like transcoding between AMB and IMB, that's crazy. That's madness. There's no way you'd ever want to do that, because you're not getting some reduced fidelity audio out on the other side. You're getting synthesized human speech out on the other side that sounds like the person on the input. Right. So my first complaint with it is that even at its best, I don't think the audio is anywhere near as good as analog FM. And my other complaint with it is that it is grossly and wildly too slow. As I come from, most of the radio operations I do these days is on the back of flatbed trucks rolling down the highway at 20 miles an hour with people on it dropping cones, right? Or people operating forklifts, or people operating any sort of heavy machinery and trying to communicate with other people operating other heavy machinery. And we're all trying to do it, and we all do it relatively fast and efficiently. And I mean, amateurs don't realize this because they're used to their analog FM rigs that take 200 milliseconds to key up. But when you've got a crew operating with like HT1250 Motorola commercial radios that have incredibly fast key up times, you can key the radio, say one syllable of and unkey the radio before a digital codec will even pick up.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so the gross slowdown in digital radios compared to commercial analog FM radios, I find incredibly obnoxious.
Well, there you go. John, rebuttal?
No, I was just looking up. It's the Bruce Perrin's K6BP, State of Digital Voice.
Gotcha.
Oh, he gives that talk every year.
Yeah.
That's as far as I've gone.
He hitched his wagon to the white box radio guy for a while, and then that kind
of... Yeah, then plot twist, Chris White didn't know how to design RF front-end hardware. So, yeah, that cost them several years.
Is that what happened?
Yeah. I mean, the white box was a good idea, and I compared against all the other SDRs, I think it was okay, but at the time, I don't think people were ready for RTL performance from an HT. Right? Everyone expected an HT to perform like other HTs, not to perform like a RTL dongle. And so I think there was a lot of disappointment there before they finally gave up on that concept. Right? And that's me getting rumors from other people that also know Bruce and Chris. Like I haven't gotten a straight dump from either of them in years.
So going back to the APRS weather thing, is that something you'd be interested in talking to them more about?
I would certainly give the same conversation I had with you to another group of people at some point.
Okay. Well, I mean,
defining APRS 2.0 is something that I think is in my future at some point, and I would very much like to do it. I think something's going to fundamentally need to change with either like my employment status or my hobby workload before that's going to happen. Because I've got a lot of very specific ideas on what APRS 2.0 is, and it's going to look remarkably similar to the parts of APRS 1.0 that everyone actually uses. I think APRS 2.0 is going to be more of a cutting out 20 years worth of legacy stuff and locking it in as something that's very crystal clear on what it should be right now, and will require everyone to change nothing. And really to emphasize getting rid of all that legacy weirdness so that we can do stuff like, hey, we want a new weather markup. Let's define it.
All right.
That's something that I want to happen, but I can't like say that it should happen or that I will do it because I'm a bit.
You have an automated system to run.
Yeah. I've got an autonomous system. I mean, that's sucked up almost all of my free time for the last 4 months.
Yeah, like seriously, like you and I had crossed paths so infrequently, I was starting to think I had pissed you off or something.
You know, I would have been on the end of the year one, except that what was happening that night?
I was saying, no, you had like an event to go to legitimately.
Yeah, there were what was it? One of my friends was giving an APRS talk, and I was there as every question he got that he didn't know the answer to, he could just punt it to some random guy in the back who happened to know all of the answers. So I was there as moral support. But yeah, like it's like I think what in November I managed to be out of town every single weekend. It was getting pretty crazy there for a while. So I have been busy.
So John, what have you been up to?
Well, we are trying. It's snowing here finally in Utah, so we are our winter field day plans just got nixed. So now we're going to plan C, I believe. We had a cabin that was accessible by snow, and then my daughter has a performance, so I can't leave town. So we went to a cabin closer, but now we got a major storm coming in this weekend, so that cabin's going to get snowed in. So now
the whole point of winter field day to handle adversity. You'll be fine.
Yes, that's why it's Plan C. It's a matter of getting to the location. I'm not worried about the coldness. I'm worried about the actually getting through the avalanche-ridden canyons. So, and I don't own a snowmobile. So anyways, that's what I'm doing. We're gonna do winter field day, and that'll be fun and cold. So
where is Plan C, like local camping or?
Our local club is setting up a trailer out at the lake at the marina, and so the coldest spot you could find in the valley because it's right on the lake. So,
and you'll be out while you'll be in the uninsulated trailer.
They're actually going to insulate. They're going to go indoor. They went outdoor last year and they didn't get much participation. So I've always wanted to. I mean, even our 2 cabins were going to be indoor class. So I'd probably just end up pairing up with our local club and do some shifts there, kind of par it down from what I wanted it to be.
So last year I couldn't do winter field day because I was a remote guest at Baycon talking about batteries. And where my club went last year, the cabin they went to was very remote. It didn't have internet access. So I was excited, first of all. Not that I'm appearing at Baycon, but it was nice that they didn't coincide in case I did have the opportunity to. But our club rented an 8-person cabin. Well, it's a cabin that supposedly sleeps 8. There's bedding for 8 people, as long as a lot of those people sleep together. I think there's 4 beds. But I mean, it's a fully developed cabin, plenty of firewood, plenty of linens, plenty of paper products. It's at a very nice state park about 2 hours north of here that everybody in my club has said really good things about. I've never been. But this 8-person sleeping cabin, there's 16 people going. And
oh dear.
The thing is, like, the thing about my club that's interesting, we've not made a strong effort to get new members in because the chemistry we have now is so perfect. So most of the people in my club are all friends from high school or their parents. So like our president's dad is a member, our president and his wife are members, our vice president, and like he lives in Columbus, but he joins our club meetings via Skype. But anyway, we have a really good crew together. And what ended up happening with Winter Field Day is our president is taking his wife and his 2 kids. I'm taking my wife and my 2 kids. So that's 8 people right there. VP is bringing 2 of his 3 kids with him. And then president's dad, who's a member, and president's mom are coming. And then we have 2 members who are either single or their spouse will not be joining. So that's where we get to our 16. So, he called the cabin owner in good faith saying, look, in your email, it specifically talks about the honor policy, about the number of people sleeping. Cabin owner was like, wow, I really appreciate your honesty. And they're like, it's plenty big enough for that many people running around. You're going to have to bring extra beds to sleep on. And we're like, yeah, the children fit in drawers. It's fine.
What is this sleeping you speak of? This is field day.
Well,
it's hot beds.
And that's the point, right? It will be. So most of the people in my club took off on that Friday and will be up there around noon. I'm only taking half a day off. My wife is only taking 2 hours off, so we'll depart here about 5, get up there at 7. The weather extended, so we've been under really frigid temperatures and a little bit of snow, but it was enough to mess the city up. But I mean, I think total there's probably 4 or 5 inches in my yard that took about a week to put there. But the weather forecast right now, well, we decided to be inside as well, lose the 1,500 points. But the weather forecast for that weekend's looking to be in the mid to upper 40s. So if that happens, then we will move back outside.
Well, you just run on satellite contact and you get your 1,500 points back.
Well, and part of the big strategy, so we're running 2 KX3s, and the big strategy is trying to do multi-mode, multi-band. Yeah. So 1 station voice, 1 station for CW and digital.
Yeah, I'll pick it up.
And we're running 3 dipoles, 2040.
So I think I am contractually obligated at this point to interject with, as a Californian, point out, we had like a 1/4 inch of rain this week, and like the traffic was just hell.
Was that because everybody was out on the ground trying to lap it up so that they had extra water, or?
No, it's just we can't handle this like slippery thing that falls on the ground and like runs off. It's
and then you complain when you don't get any.
Yeah, well,
it's California.
Yeah, although Reservoir Lake San Antonio is actually relatively full these days, which I care about because that's where my main big event, Wildflower, happens every year. So we are doing Wildflower this year. So 4 triathlons in 1 weekend.
Wow.
So that's we've started doing the meetings for it, and it happens like first weekend of May, and so it's I'm going to be going down there for site prep for about the 2 months every other weekend before that. So
are you going to make the trip out for Dayton?
I have started seriously thinking about that. I've had a couple of people say that they always really enjoy hanging out with me at Maker Faire. I know that Smitty is headed to Dayton. I wanted to find out what you were doing, whether this was going to be the year that we all go to Dayton, or if this is the year we're all going to go to Maker Faire. And I wanted to find out what Jerry Ellsworth was doing, because I've been kind of annoyed that she and I have been missing each other for so long, and I don't get to hang out with her much. So I was depending on what she was doing and what what all of Ham Radio 360 crew was doing. That was probably going to decide which one I was going to.
So George and I are doing Dayton again this year. Kale will not be there, so we will have a booth for Workbench. Trying to think. John, I know you sent me an email the other day about media passes. Does that mean you're not going to have a booth this year?
Yeah, I'm not going to have a booth. Well, it depends, I guess. I have multiple plans. I have a flight and I have a hotel, so I'll be there either way. Now, whether I get funded enough for a booth, if we get sponsors or whatever, if I get a booth or if not, but either way, I'll be there. It just depends on what capacity, whether I bring a couple video guys with me, or if I do what you did, just walk around with a handheld mic, or I walk around with a paparazzi crew. Cool.
Yeah, so if you don't have a booth, obviously you're welcome to come hang out at ours. We our approach this year is going to have to be a little bit different. And honestly, the way that Dayton went last year, and with as much traffic as we had at the booth, we didn't get to do the level of general Dayton coverage that we'd done the year before. On day one, we were scrambling to get interviews at the end of the day. Another thing that seemed to be different this year is in Dayton's past, we would show up on Thursday, almost everybody's all set up and everybody's just kind of low key hanging out. Whereas, as you saw, there were people still assembling their giant booths until 11 o'clock at night on Thursday. So it's almost at Hera, they could get access, I think, starting on Monday before Hamvention. You could start, I think, camping on Sunday, you get access on Monday. It was almost like they couldn't get access until Wednesday or Thursday. So that put a damp on it too, because used to, we could go get interviews with a lot of people on Thursday when nobody is under any pressure. So this year, our interviews are going to be focused on things specifically in the workbench realm rather than trying to cover all of Dayton again.
Yeah, I'm coming in Wednesday night because I want to be there, like you said, for Thursday setup. I think that's the good time to get stuff. So Thursday, and then I actually fly out Saturday late night, the last flight out on Saturday. So I won't even be there on Sunday.
Yeah, and Sunday this year is when I got a lot of our interviews because at least for
it slowed down. The
makery stuff, yeah, it had slowed down. So Kenneth, I mean that's some information for you. Jerry was there last year. I didn't.
Yeah.
I had several people tweet at me, and she tweeted me, and she's like, "Oh, we're over." You know, like we tried to connect, and it never happened. Yeah. I did get to connect with Travis Goodspeed though. So yeah, I would be surprised if they came out again since they were there. I don't know. Maybe they.
I don't know. With how much amateur radio stuff Jerry is doing these days up in her house with Amy, like I would be a little surprised if she ever went back to Maker Faire at this point.
Okay.
All right. So I mean,
find out.
So, yeah, I'm gonna find out what her plan is, and if she's going back to Dayton again, I think that's gonna put me pretty squarely in that I'm gonna want to go to Dayton, and then it's just a question of after. At that point, it's going to be, 3 straight months of taking PTO every week. It's going to be a question of how much can I take off and how do I want to get there? Because I'm probably going to want to fly there, but that probably precludes me impulse buying anything sizable.
Oh, no, you'd be surprised at how easy they make it to ship things directly from Dayton back to your home. And people at the booths are also upselling you because you're not going to pay Ohio tax if you ship it home.
There you go. Yeah.
No, they figured that out so you don't have to.
Got it. Yeah. That okay. Well, I'm probably not going to drive out there though, because I think the road trip thing that Smitty is doing, it looks somewhat fun, and I have wanted to do a road trip. I just haven't wanted to do a road trip out to Dayton.
Ohio. Yeah, no, I get you. Yeah. I don't even like driving home, and that's only like 20 minutes.
So what is public access for Dayton? Is it like Thursday to Sunday then, or?
No, it's Friday through Sunday.
Okay.
But if you came, I would just get you one of our vendor passes.
Okay, yeah, that's usually what happens. Like I have gone to Maker Faire now 6 years in a row, and honest to God, to a T, every single year. I have bought a Maker Faire ticket, shown up Friday, someone has handed me a sponsor's badge or an exhibitor's badge and said, please God help us, we need another body on our booth. And then every single year, 6 years in a row, I've gone out Saturday morning and gifted a ticket to someone in line in front of Maker Faire.
So I'm real quickly, for the 5 of you still watching, I appreciate you hanging out. I'm going to stop the broadcast now because I have some stuff I need to talk to these guys about. But have a fantastic evening.
Any final questions from the chat? Like this, we'll open it up for one final set of questions.
Yeah, final question in the chat. People that are left.
Woo! How do you even see the chat? I'm not even seeing that. Oh, maybe I'll turn it on.
Yeah, you got to.
I turned it on.
Well, so there's the chat for this.
Our private chat. You have to open the YouTube video.
Yeah, you go to Jeremy's YouTube channel. You mute the audio as fast as you can, and then the chat there. You pop that out and you close the YouTube video again. Which sadly, the chat doesn't give the numbers on how many are watching.
Yes, it does. So 2 things do. The chat below the chat, like there are 5 watching now, but the Google Hangout window shows me there are 5 viewers.
Oh yeah, so as the streamer, your Hangout tells you, and the sub bar in the YouTube video itself tells you. I don't see it in the Hangout because I'm not the one streaming, and I always pop out the chat so that I can have the Hangouts up and then I have the chat over it. And that doesn't tell me, so I can't afford to both stream the Hangouts and the YouTube video on my internet. So
nobody asked any questions. So we'll say
So
to the audience, and
thanks, guys,
for watching. And then you guys stick around.